we're not perfect. We think we know what we know, but there's a whole, like infinite universe of things we don't know. And I think like the best thing for me, like going forward, is to stay curious about things that I'm interested in, and to know that, hey, I can always learn something new in life. And you know what I mean? I never want to cap my intelligence and thinking I know everything I need to know. I'm better than everyone. I don't need to know anything else, because that's never going to happen. I'm always going to learn new things.
For you, speak for yourself. I know everything.
Which is
I
fine.
know everything. I have nothing left to learn.
Which is fine, man. For people, it's just, you know what I mean. I think it's just like that should not like stop you from getting together with someone and experiencing and exchanging, like, what we're here to experience, which is life. I've always known, like, to some degree, like, this bullshit, this divide, these, this power, this evil power has been in the world, and I've been able to maneuver through it. But because all of this stuff happened within the past few years, like, I'm in the fight now. And now I have, like, sturdy legs. I have my feet planted on the floor in who I am and what I'm offering to the world. And if people don't recognize or vibe with that, cool. I'm not the one missing out. It all comes back for me the sooner we realize we're all in this together, trying to have fun, love each other, experience these new things without the external people telling us how to think and how to feel. We're going to experience and gain so many more beautiful things that life has to offer. It's all around us. It's just if we choose to get angry, upset, it is choices we're making. You know what I mean? We may get triggered, and it may be something we're like, automatically stuck in, but you can choose to step out of it.
Yeah.
But like
right.
the way we're doing it so far is not working.
No.
It's just a clusterfuck of shouting. It's all it is, really.
Absolute clusterfuck.
Yeah.
Who are you and why are you here? Are we gonna live life in fear, or are we gonna stand up and make sure we're heard? Are we gonna hide or live life by our word? With integrity we can be all that we can see in our mind's eye until we're finally free. We can become whatever we choose once we know the choice lies within me and you. Now's the time to wake up. No time for playing small. With a painful history and an uncertain future, now is the time to evolve.
Hello, and welcome to the Unapologetically Human podcast with me, your host, Dan Boyman. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a while, which over the course of my producing this podcast has often been the case. I've gone through periods of creation and putting out episodes and periods of distraction and avoidance, maybe hibernation, you could say. And often when it's been a while since I've put out an episode, I will take this opportunity in the introduction to the upcoming conversation to speak to that and give you a little bit of an update of what may have been going on in my life, or what is going on in my life since I put out my last episode. But I think I'll spare you the details. I've been working crazy hours. I've been dealing with some health issues. And of course, the theme of this podcast is trying to understand myself and other people in this crazy world that we live in. And things have been pretty wild out there these days in the craziness going on in our society, in societies across the world. And so I won't go into detail with any of that right now. Vijay and I talk about some of the things that are going on in our conversation, and I will just say, I do want to say that whoever's listening, I know everything's a lot. Everything going on, if you're on your phone, if you're on social media, like so many of us are, if you're paying attention to geopolitics, which it's harder for people not to these days with the ongoing wars and the political divides, the upcoming elections, all that kind of stuff. It can be a lot, and we all have our personal challenges in our lives. And so from one human to another, just want to say, you're not alone. I'm going through shit. Pretty much everyone I know is going through some shit. The world is clearly going through some shit. And we're in this together. The good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. I just hope that you're able to take care of yourself as best as you can through all of the challenges that you may be going through and that we're witnessing the world go through together. And with that, let's get into the conversation. I had a conversation with my buddy Vijay probably a couple years ago. That was supposed to be a podcast episode quite a while back, and I unfortunately lost that recording, which we talk about in this conversation. I was glad to have him back on for another chat. We talk about a lot of things going on in the world in this conversation. I tell about how I lost our previous conversation. We talk about a podcast I listened to, I'll share in the show notes, about the rise and fall of empires through history, including the cycles of stability and integration and the cycles of instability and disintegration that human beings going through, that society is going through. And we talk about listening to your inner voice, setting boundaries, and telling people to fuck off when necessary, and the importance of having people in your life who you can have conversations with, where you can disagree and you can have debates and you can challenge each other's thoughts and ideas and beliefs and not have it threaten the friendship, which is something that is sorely lacking in our world today. That is a skill that we need to relearn and reintroduce and cultivate to talk about and to solve the problems that we're faced with. We talk about the importance of filling up your cup first. As we know, the saying goes, you can't give to other people, you can't pour into other people if you don't have a full cup yourself. And the need to stop people pleasing, and for us to find ways to live with each other despite our differences and to actually cultivate tolerance. And in the latter half of the episode, I go into some detail explaining to Vijay some of the controversies surrounding Dr. Jordan Peterson and what he and others call compelled speech, how he's been demonized and vilified unjustly. I talk about what he and his actual philosophies are about and how we cannot have free societies without free speech. We talk about how people get wrapped up into ideologies because they attach their own identity to a set of beliefs and ideas, which leads them to attack and demonize others who disagree with them because they see it as a personal attack on themselves. We talk about the history of psychological epidemics and how they disproportionately affect women due to biological and psychological vulnerabilities, and much, much more. So, as always, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode. And if you do, or you want to provide feedback, it really helps other people find the show if you can leave a rating and a review wherever you listen to the podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or elsewhere. And I'd love to hear any feedback that you have about this episode or suggestions for future episodes. You can reach out to me on Instagram. My handles are in the show notes. And if you'd like to support the show, there are links for my Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the show notes as well. Any help is appreciated. Ratings and reviews, much appreciated. Any feedback is appreciated. I really love to hear from people who've listened to the show, to hear what you think, hear what you thought, or just to say hi and to meet the listeners. So, without further ado, I give you my conversation with my friend and fellow artist who I've done a few different leadership programs with, Vijay Maharaj. Let's go.
Sounds good. Awesome.
We will not be losing this conversation again. I just had to get that on recording now. Okay, so we're recording.
Solid agreement. Okay, good.
Cool, man. All right. Well, I guess, yeah, we can kind of jump into it. So
Sounds good.
It's interesting, actually. Are you familiar with Barry Weiss or her podcast, Honestly?
Not really. No, I can't say.
Or have you heard of the Free Press or seen like?
I've heard of the Free Press.
So
yes.
she's like the creator of the Free Press, and
Oh,
she
okay.
has a podcast called Honestly that's like really, really good. Like her newest episode is with this, like, I forget his name. I've only listened to the first 10 minutes or so, but it's with this historian who it has like a background in like biological sciences and data science of some sort, so that he's essentially turned studying history into a very data driven, so that it's more scientific, basically. And so when I like found the episode, it was because she reposted somebody posting on her story saying like, this is probably like the most fascinating talk I've ever heard, and like Barry Weiss is probably like the best interviewer like they've ever heard. And I would say like she really is like, she like her ability to just like ask really good questions and just like really go into the kind of details of what this person is about to ask questions and have a conversation with them is like, she's great. But I was thinking about that because I think she always, I remember like sort of picking up on it when I listened to this one. She always like starts off being kind of like, Vijay Maharaj, welcome to the Unapologetically Human podcast. Like she like, but she says it like, welcome to the Honestly podcast.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I always say this is a podcast about trying to understand ourselves, each other, and this crazy, fucked up modern world that we're living in better. And so yeah, like I've kind of already mentioned, I don't have anything in particular planned for us to talk about
no
today.
itinerary, really? Just
I don't,
freestyling it.
Yeah, I don't have any like questions queued up for you or anything. We're just two friends hanging out, having a chat, and I'm sure there'll be topics of interest that we'll touch on. I guess we could start out though explaining that this is podcast number 2 for Vijay and I. He, actually, his first episode was supposed to come out before the last 2 episodes, but when I went to edit it, I almost overwrote it, because I basically have a template file that has sort of all of the tracks set up for intro, outro, a spot for us to record our conversation, and so I like it's interesting because most of my conversations recently have been Zoom recordings. So I'm just downloading the recording off Zoom and then I'm popping it into the file.
And editing it from there.
And then editing
Nice.
it. But our conversation, like right now, is in person. Like last time was in person. So I already had the file with the recording. But I had since updated my template file to do some EQing on the vocals and stuff. So I went to essentially like save the template to put like our conversation into. And this is a bit of a PSA for like how not to fucking lose a recording in a way that you didn't think was possible. So I almost did like the obvious thing not to do that will clearly like fuck it over. I almost took the template file, and when I went to like save that as to save it for our conversation, I almost just accidentally overwrote our whole existing file and conversation. But I caught myself. I didn't do that. And then I took the recording file out of our file, opened the new template file that I like saved for our conversation, and I put it in there. And now I'm thinking, okay, I've copied it. I'm good. I put it into the new template file. And now I can just save it. And you know that this is actually funny because I had a couple things or a few things around the time that this happened where I didn't listen to my intuition. I didn't listen to that little voice being like, you should do this or you shouldn't do this. And I'm like, it'll be fine. And like one of the things that happened was like,
sure enough.
well, like you know, one thing was like innocuous. Like I went to work one day and I'm like in my head, I'm like, you should really bring like your raincoat today. Like,
yeah.
And I'm like, or no, it was a sweater because I'm like, it was like, you know, springtime. It'll be cold once I'm like leaving work. It's gonna be a nice day.
And sure enough, later on into the day,
and I'm like, no, I think it'll be fine. Yeah. And no, what actually happened was that was like, you know how when whenever like spring and nice weather comes around for us here in like southern Ontario, it kind of like gets nice for like a week or two, and then it gets cold again, and then it gets nice for a week or two, and it gets cold again.
It's basically a roller coaster of fluctuations in the weather and everything. It's just like, make up your mind, universe. Like, what you want me to feel
What
today?
happened on this fateful day though was that I was leaving my house and my brain is like, you should really bring like your jacket or your sweater because it might be cold after work. But the past 3 days weren't cold after work. And I was like, it'll be fine. And I didn't bring it. And then that night we had the fucking weird polar vortex thing came through that was like actually out of the ordinary.
Was that what, like the snowstorm with the lightning?
It wasn't like that. It just was like a weird, unusual, even for the sort of nice weather, cold weather fluctuations that we have in spring. This was like an unusually cold like front that came in. So I didn't bring my fucking jacket or sweater. I was wearing shorts, and it went down to -2 that night.
Interesting.
And I'm like, and so that night I'm like, fuck, I should have fucking listened to that voice, man. And so what happened with your podcast episode, I opened the template, I copied the sound recordings. There was like several of them. We had sort of the test and the, you know, the pause for something. And I copied them all into the old file or into the new file. And then I think I've copied it.
Yeah.
It's fine. And in my brain, it's like, save it as a new file. Don't overwrite the old file. But in my head, I'm like, but I copied it, so it's fine. So I didn't listen to that voice. I tried to just resave it over the original file. But what happened, which I realized after, because I reopened it, and it had the files looking like they were in there. But when I tried to play it, it came up with this error that I had never seen before that said it like it couldn't find the original files. So rather than, I thought I almost just overwrote the whole file, and then I caught myself and didn't do it, and then I copied the files and thought I was good, and I didn't fucking save it as a second file like I thought I should, just in case, because I was like, just in case, if I save it as a second file, there won't be an issue no matter what.
Yep.
But for me, for some reason, I think I was like low on space on my computer, and that will be like a 3 gig extra file or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I didn't need the space. I need the space. And so I'm like, it'll be fine. I've copied it. But because the actual original files of the recording files were attached to that file, when I overwrote it, it essentially didn't actually have a new copy of those recordings.
I see.
So it looked like they were still there. But
long story short, trust your inner voice, everybody.
Yeah, basically, yeah, like super long explanation. But yeah, so I fucking lost that. I was so pissed too when it happened, because I was like,
I figured it kind of worked out for both of us, right? Because even like when we left, when my mind is a lot more clear without the influence of alcohol, not like we drank like.
Well, we had like two
exactly,
beers.
And like I was considering I'm not much of a drinker. That's sometimes it's all it takes for me to like not so much be foggy, just like not articulate clearly how I'm feeling in the moment. You know what I mean? It dilutes it a little bit.
I remember you mentioning that, and I was so he was essentially saying like, okay, like it's not that big of a deal that it got lost. Like, he wasn't pissed at all. I was pretty pissed because I was like excited to.
No, I was actually excited that it got deleted, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I was excited to revisit that conversation and to edit it and to share it. Like, I really actually do enjoy the whole process of creating. And then when it was lost, it was like, fuck, like, lost that, like, it was a 2-hour conversation, right? And then, you had mentioned that, like, you sort of had this feeling that maybe you didn't articulate yourself as well as you would have liked to, or maybe you articulated something that you would have, like, sort of changed how you said something, or you left something out, and those types of thoughts. My response to you, sort of, especially being on the creation side of the episodes I've created, where I'm really like listening to my whole fucking conversation and having those feelings, I'm kind of like, I feel like you would be surprised, like, had I not lost the conversation and I had have shared that conversation, because you're probably going to have similar feelings about this one.
We'll see. I guess we'll see.
Because that's a natural thing for people to feel, right? But I feel like you'd be surprised at if or when you actually hear the conversation again, that doesn't like bear out to be true, or even if it is in some sense, it's like it's
I mean that year, because that was 2022 when we did it, right? And like not even a couple of months ago, more than 2022. And like I feel like that was the toughest year for me, because I think that's when like I was starting to buckle after trying to keep the the positivity and the faith high for not just myself, but for everyone else around me. And I think that year I was a lot more like starting to buckle. Like 2023 so far, I feel like it's been the first year for me to actually get back to living my life with the fun that I remember that I've always had. And it's come with, it's like I needed to acknowledge all the things. I think for a majority of the time I've been trying to like still maneuver around it, not really cutting through it. You know what I mean? So I'm a lot more like, this year has been a game changer of a year for me in many different ways. So I'm a lot more like confident and just outwardly spoken about, I guess, lots of what's going on in the world right now, because it's just, we need to be able to have these kinds of conversations with each other and like be in a conversation and not just, you know what I mean? Like trying to lift each other up through just being aware of what's going on around us. You know what I mean? And just making sure we're all helping each other grow properly and just...
and just to sort of touch on what I recollect, and I'm curious what you recollect from that conversation, just to sort of fill in a bit of like a gap, is basically... And this was... I wanted to have you on because I like to have conversations with friends that I enjoy talking to, obviously. But also, you were working for Canada Post. You refused to get vaccinated and lost your job. And
not lost, just put on a leave without pay.
We're put on a leave without pay.
Basically, not working for almost a year. Yeah.
Right. With like, a lot of people experience similar things over the course of the pandemic and the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and stuff. So I wanted to, and we talked a lot about your experience with that whole thing, and obviously we got, and I don't want to get too deep into that for this conversation, obviously, because we don't want to try to recreate that conversation.
And I also think to some degree we're kind of like, not like you and me. I guess the whole world is kind of moving past it.
Yeah,
exactly.
a little bit. Because we also we really talked a lot about how fucked up so many things were around the pandemic and the masking mandates and the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and the political divides on every single one of these issues and the demonization of those who didn't get vaccinated. I ended up getting vaccinated for a number of reasons, and I've never had any of these feelings, or the media really was pushing a lot of this against the unvaccinated, saying fuck them, let them die, that fucking headline that was on the Toronto Star.
I don't think anybody's ever gonna forget that, man. No. How was that allowed to be published, first of all? You know what I mean?
So insane, what happened. So yeah, we ended up we really went deep on that. Do you remember anything else we talked about in that conversation?
I think we brushed up on that. I think also my involvement in just in going to the Freedom Convoy, and I guess
right.
I think what my account was just how I've been able to stay afloat, I guess, not so much financially but also just mentally for myself, in terms of just not so much keeping my reality intact, but also reminding people of, hey, it's just because lots of what you just brushed up on in terms of the psychological and the political divide, there's still still feel like there's a lot of deep separation between people that kind of still exists mentally.
Probably more than last time we talked. Yeah, on a lot of fronts.
And right? I think for me it was a lot of mentioning how I've been able to just remind people of how our lives were before all of this shit happened. There was still that unity and that connection that everybody's still in touch with. We just had to remember through having conversation and be willing to listen to one another, and just remembering that, well, basically like your shirt. More love.
I wore this shirt because I knew you would like this shirt. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that about the sort of more unity or less conflict before the pandemic and stuff. The podcast that I was referencing, honestly, with I think the guy's name is David Turchin, and he's this scientifically data driven historian, essentially.
Okay.
And he wrote a book, and they're talking a lot about the book called End Times, and what he has essentially done. Basically, one of the things that they talk about first, and that he sort of a big part of this book that he wrote, and that she asked him about, is that he predicted in 2010 that the U.S. would hit a peak of political instability and violence and stuff like that in 2020.
Interesting.
He predicted that in 2010, and so obviously when anybody predicts anything, and he even says how people don't want to make negative predictions because everyone if you're going to be challenged on it.
Yeah.
And if it proves to be untrue, then you're going to be criticized. And if it proves to be true, no one wants to believe it anyway, because everyone wants to believe that everything's going to be okay and we're going to get through shit and society's not going to collapse. But one of the things he talks about is it's you look at the history of different countries and empires and rise and fall over long spans of history, but even the instability of the US alone from the separation from the UK and fight for its independence to the Civil War and these really big sort of calamities that happen. They obviously they don't follow a super rigid timeline, but human society, which people have been philosophizing about and talking about, theorizing about for millennia, is that we're cyclical. We go through these cycles. The idea that it's when we have good times, it's good strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times, and bad times create strong men again who create good times again, and we go through these cycles, and we go through sort of cycles of stability and integration and cycles of instability and disintegration. And so one of the major parts of his prediction for 2020 to sort of have that peak back into a disintegration and turmoil and instability is that there was these peaks essentially in like 1770 and 1820 and around 1870 and around 1920 and around 1970. So he's like, we're probably going to have something happen again around 2020. It's not like he predicted like we're going to have a pandemic that's going to spark this or that, but it's like we're due for some shit, man. like this is what humans do, right?
I mean, if anyone predicted something accurately, I believe it was Chris Sky. You know what I mean? Just like in terms of like what was coming, the lockdowns and masking, and they're gonna do all these things and take away our freedoms, which basically is exactly what happened. I don't know if you remember seeing that, but he was in Dundas Square when it was happening, and then he basically said on the camera what was happening within the past few years in like into early 2020, I think.
Yeah, I'm not like I think I know who you're talking about because he ran for mayor recently.
Yeah,
and I saw signs like it's like Chris Sky, like Sakoshia.
Yeah,
something like that.
And I thought, you know, like
he's a fucking character too.
And he's 100%. No, at the same like, and that was my first impression of him. And then, you know, like the more he appeared on camera, the more I like, you know, I started paying attention a little bit, right? But like at the same time, he's also educating us on what's coming, and you know, we need to tap into our inner, you know, our lone wolves and our, you know, our lion selves, and just like know what it's like to just think for ourselves and just to question something if you don't agree with it. You know what I mean? Maybe not at the rate he was delivering it.
Yeah, that's why I said he's a character. Like, he's quite intense. Well, he's like an Andrew Tate. Like he gets like super demonized for the way he delivers things, even more than what he's delivering sometimes.
He definitely had a role to play in all of this, and whether people got something positive or negative from it, like, you know, just at least for me, it's just I can't really tell you which side of it I stand on. I have gratitude that he did what he did. I think everybody had a role to play in this to move people forward, or, you know, make people want to keep their heads still buried in the sand with it all. You know what I mean? I think that's for me, that's the troubling thing now, is just as much as I'm enjoying and remembering what it's like to live and love my life again, there's still people who, like, at some point and somewhere deep down in their psyche, they had their head buried in the sand of all this shit. And maybe it's just, and who am I to say, like, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. You know what I mean? I think for me, going forward is just making sure I'm living my life as I see fit, inspiring people the way I want to. You know what I mean? And you know, this is you know, I guess maybe you kind of got this from me, but as much of a softie as I am, like, sometimes you need to really invoke your right to say fuck you to people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's like that idea that it's like you can be a kind and a compassionate and a loving person and still tell people to fuck off and set boundaries. And that's like one of the things that, for instance, it's like, you know, even mentioning the name Andrew Tate, for some people, if they're listening to this and they hear that, they might tune out and make all sorts of like snap judgments and stuff based on what I would say like has happened with so many people. Like, it's so easy to take a clip out of a long conversation out of context, especially if there's context around that clip that actually makes that clip mean the opposite of what was said surrounding it, which is literally things that are being done to many people. But people like Andrew Tate, it's like he's called a misogynist and like a woman hater, and that he's like almost like how, like, you know, Socrates back in the day was put to death, to like the trial that he was ended up being put to death. Like, the charge against him was essentially like corrupting the minds of the youth of Athens. And if you listen to people talk about what he was actually doing, was getting people to think for themselves, to question authority, to question sort of the dictates of what those in power were putting on them and on the society. And he was deemed to be corrupting the minds of the youth because he was getting people to question power and authority of people who didn't want to have their power and authority questioned. And so they get sort of like lambasted with these like labels. And in his case, he was put to death. And they gave him sort of like time to get out of town. It was kind of like a threat to, we're gonna charge you with this bogus trial, and if you're convicted, which you will be because the systems are corrupt. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
To anything these days, we're gonna put you to death.
Yep.
But it was kind of like, Jordan Peterson talks about this story about Socrates, who it's like, unlike Jesus, who is unsure if this was in fact a real person who existed, or if it's stories about something. We know Socrates existed. Mm-hmm. We know for a fact that this was a human being. He's one of the most famous Stoics and philosophers that have ever existed, and this story happened to him. It is utterly unquestioned as to have been a real series of events that happened to a real person. It's like in Jordan Peterson's another person who has these things taken out of context to paint him as something that he isn't.
Yeah.
But basically it's like he talks about how essentially this was kind of like trying to run Socrates out of town, being like, we don't like what you're doing, standing up to us and our power, basically,
and educating these
and
citizens,
educating people out of being able to think critically out of the essentially propaganda that's being fed to us.
Which is essentially what people like Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson are doing. You know what
right.
I mean?
Well, that's why I bring both of them
Yeah.
up and relate it to this. He ended up, because, it's actually interesting going back to that, listening to that voice inside. They essentially, he called his inner voice a daemon, which is essentially thinking like another word for a demon, or that's where the word demon comes from, but not in a negative evil possession kind of way.
Okay.
Just that the conscience was this voice in his head that wasn't him per se. It's it was a voice that's talking to him that he could either choose to listen to or and abide by,
kind of like an intuition from his future or something like that.
or ignore. Well,
Yeah.
it's synonymous with our conscious mind, right?
Yeah.
And basically one of the reasons why he was so famous is that he was said to have, he didn't necessarily always do what his inner voice or his conscience told him to do, but he was religiously rigid, essentially, or committed to listening to it when it told him not to do something.
Interesting.
And that made him this really good person who's been remembered for thousands of years because of the level of conviction and commitment to his values, essentially, are part of that reputation. And so when the powerful in Athens who were trying to run him out of town, they kind of gave him 6 months notice. We're going to put you on trial in 6 months. It's kind of we don't really want to kill you, but you're annoying us.
So
and
we're gonna.
So it was kind of we're giving you plenty of time.
Yeah.
Get out of town, basically. And so his friends and his family are all yo, get out of town.
Yeah,
man.
which is basically what they're doing with I think what they did with the Tate brothers and what they're trying to do with Jordan Peterson right now, right? So,
in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
right? They're get out of town. And so he was I should probably get out of town.
And
so,
I'm glad that there was enough of an uproar in the city for people defending Jordan Peterson, man, because I still consider myself a newbie into paying attention to some of his listenings and his teachings and everything, but I feel like when people, exactly what you said, when people hear Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate, so many triggers just spiral off. You know what I mean? But and even when they're listening to videos, it's okay, but you're listening to these people through the filter of your trigger. You know what I mean? Because I feel
it's also being disingenuinely, things are pulled out of context and,
Yeah,
and
of
downright
course.
lies that I saw Jordan Peterson live on a lecture
Jealous. Nice.
on his 12 Rules for Life, and it was one of the best talks I've ever heard, and it had next to nothing to do with the things that he is painted as this right-wing fucking evil super Nazi.
No, of course not. I think if you're paying to go see him, you're going there to listen, right?
But I've listened to countless lectures of his,
And I think that's the problem though. I think lots of people are just not, and it's not so much that they're not capable of having that deep listening. I just think once you're triggered, you shut off everything immediately.
But
you know
so
what I
many
mean?
things in the mainstream are slanderous lies
Of course,
that people
yeah.
believe. Like I've gotten in quite a number of conversations.
The Freedom Convoy is a perfect example of that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
I've gotten quite a number of conversations with people about Jordan Peterson, where the second his name is mentioned, they get triggered and sort of shut off, and then start acting like I'm some right-wing Nazi. How could I possibly like this guy or listen to him? He's clearly such a hateful right-wing misogynist.
People don't like hearing that you have an opinion different from someone else's.
Right.
Basically,
But the thing is that like there's been a few friends that these experiences have happened with, but it happened with my older brother one time, and it kind of gave me like a, oh no, not you too, who has some rigid opinion about this guy that's based on what I know to be factually lies.
Yeah.
And that I know that whatever, this is my brother.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, I know him. I know what he's like. I know what his interests are like. I know how he lives his life.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that he's not informed in any deep way about who this person is. And I know there's basically a 0% chance that he's ever listened to him talk in any length capacity, and that he has made a rigid opinion based on a mainstream slander of him, of which I like to make up my beliefs and my opinions off of the best knowledge that I can. So I actively seek out differing opinions,
which is good because
right?
Lots of people just follow what they see on hear on TV.
I
right?
have
So
like literally read every single hit piece against Jordan Peterson, and I'm not he's not a god, he's not to be worshipped. It's not like there's no valid criticism toward him or Tate or these people.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact that the way he's being portrayed is slanderous and lies. For instance, my brother sent me a article about him from Vox, which is a left-wing publication, which most mainstream media are left-leaning, like most institutions are, for a variety of reasons. But he's like, oh, is the stuff in this article not true? I don't think there's anything in this article that's not true. And I read it, and I'm like, there's almost not a single truthful thing in this article. It's not that there's like nothing at all that's true, but it's utterly taken out of context, and it's clearly painted as a hit piece. And mind you, I'm like, I've listened to so many like in-depth conversations of him in particular, where it's like the guy's a fucking clinical psychologist, and he was a psychology professor at Harvard and U of T over the course of fucking 20 plus years for both his teaching and his clinical practice as a psychologist. And he's giving...
So the guy knows some shit.
Right, and it's like... And he's giving really deep philosophical and psychological explanations for all of the most challenging things, not only to like understand, but also that humans have been fighting about forever. Because one of the things that he has focused his whole career on has been to understand what happened in the 20th century in Nazi Germany and in the Soviet Union, in communism, in China, and like in, I think it was Cambodia with Pol Pot, and to understand like how could humans possibly have done these horrific things. And not to mention, we created these weapons of utter annihilation for ourselves that we to this day are continuing to point at each other with the countries that we disagree with, primarily the US and NATO countries and Russia and China. And now look what's happening with like the Ukraine war. Like we these are things that humans have been like getting into violently Holocaust destructive fights for essentially like we've kind of always been doing this, but now we're at the point where we have these weapons that have such capacity to like destroy our entire civilization.
Especially with like the production of AI coming out, man, like that shit's scary.
Right.
I like imagine forfeiting your own intelligence for artificial intelligence. You know what I
I mean,
It's
there's
just-
lots of reasons that it's going to be like a good thing, and there's lots of reasons that it's like potentially dangerous. But that's a side we can kind
Yeah.
of pop into. But basically, it's like this is a human being who Jordan Peterson, who has spent his life trying to understand how humans could possibly have done the most horrific things that they've ever done, all of which the most recent have been the worst in the 20th century. So in the past 100 years, World War One, World War Two, the Cold War, we're still fucking pointing nukes at each other with the mutual, you know, it's like the reason we haven't used them after the US dropped them on Japan twice
Yep.
is that term mutually assured destruction, that if we use them again, we are mutually assured to destroy our civilization. And I don't know if you've heard this, but the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki are bombs of a size that are counted in sort of like megatons of whatever the ammunition sort of is on it.
Yeah.
I think it's like the atomic bombs were first, and I think the H bomb, like a hydrogen bomb, that I might not be correct on the terminology here, but I am correct on this, that the newer nukes, of which mostly is what the US and like Russia are armed with, uses the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which instantly incinerated hundreds of thousands of people and entire massive cities to rubble. The newer, bigger bombs use those bombs as their ignition source. They're that much bigger.
Interesting.
They're
Wow.
that much bigger. Like
Cool.
insanely bigger, right? And so he has been trying to answer for himself, how could humans have done this, and how could we still be, you know, under the threat of now with the Ukraine war, the proxy war of the West and US and NATO against Russia, a threat of possibly, like, you know, annihilating ourselves.
Yeah.
And because he has taken essentially like some positions that people don't like or people don't agree with, in his understanding and explanation of how this has happened, what actually happened in Nazi Germany, how did regular people become the prison guards of Auschwitz and these other fucking Nazi concentration camps, and what actually happened in the Soviet Union, how did regular people do the absolutely horrific things that they did, and how is it related to what's happening today, and how could we possibly stop ourselves from going down this path again, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this, my experience of this person is that he's a deeply knowledgeable person who has really quite noble values towards the things he's trying to understand and explain and prevent, but because people think he's being so-called transphobic because he doesn't want the government to have the power to compel people's speech, to force people to use specific types of language, which he makes a distinguishing, like he draws a line between, like, you know, we have laws against hate speech.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's more understandable. Like, it makes sense. You can't
I feel
certain
it's
things.
Yeah, it's more like, you know, just having, like, what am I trying to say? I don't know, basically just trying to correct every single word and sentence and phrase we need to say to each other just for inclusivity.
Well, that's
you know
kind
what
of
I
what's
mean?
happening now.
Exactly,
that he's,
but
like,
it's
doesn't
just,
agree with.
and
right?
it's just like, if you don't feel inclusive when people are being spoken to, it's like, I don't think, like, you know, raising hell or raising this war that's going on everywhere in the world is the way to do it. You know what I mean? I feel like people, if you want to engage with someone, and if someone accidentally, like, mispronounces your gender, I don't think that's something enough for people to fly off the handle. You know what I mean? I feel like if you're in conversation with someone, I feel like as soon as people are triggered, they forget to be in a conversation, and, you know, at some point it's just like, okay, now we're just flinging.
Well, they
now
shut down and they don't listen.
And now, like, we have invisible snowballs, and we're flinging our intelligence at each other. You know what I mean? Instead of just actually, like, getting to the bottom or just being in the conversation with people. What, like, my impression with Jordan Peterson, like, I feel like he's he's hardwiring us to just the topics that and just the ways of thinking that are going to make us stronger in the end of
Well, he
whatever
speaks
our
a
lives.
lot about personal responsibility, and there's so many people on the politically correct side.
Yeah.
Far left-leaning political
Which I'm neither.
radical political
which
activists.
I'm neither or, man. I'm neither
It's-
left or
it's-
right.
It's like these questions all about rights.
Yeah.
Like there's so many like you can't violate my rights, and there's like such a lack of conversation or acceptance of that rights come with responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a massive part that of like his entire thing that he talks about is that like we want meaning and purpose in our life, and you get meaning and purpose through shouldering the suffering that comes with life, because our parents are all gonna die, our friends are all gonna die, we're all gonna die.
Dude,
people get sick, and
our grandparents
go insane.
Our grandparents had it significantly worse than we do. We have so many advancements in technology, and just like we do have it easier. And it's with people like with Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate, like they're just like it's all about how you choose to listen. You can choose to listen through the filter of your triggers, or like just look at what they're trying to educate you towards. You know what I mean? For all the posts you see on Andrew Tate about like, him being a woman hater, I saw this one where he's talking about grandparents. It's like your grandmother my grandmother, I'm just saying gave birth to 5 children. I have 3 uncles and 2 aunts, and they created this wide spectrum of a family. And like, you know what I mean? And this is him saying this. So I'm listening to this, and like after that reel that I saw, I had significantly much more respect and gratitude for my last grandmother, because like the family.
Oh, it's wild to think.
There's just and that little bit of a perspective change.
Like.
Yeah, and that little bit of a shift in the different perspective can add so much like release to you if you're letting to will it in. But if you're still gonna put up a front just because someone says something you don't agree with, man, is it really worth it?
Or you saw a 30-second video of this person where it is being painted that this is who this person is.
Yeah.
Taken out of context of what may have been or what was said around that, and that often can literally make the understanding reverse to what the person is actually saying, which is often done.
Yeah.
It's like, Patrick Bet-David is a guy, has a platform called Valuetainment, and he's like a really great interviewer.
Valuetainment, that's a good one.
And when Andrew Tate first got banned off of social media, Patrick Bet-David and a co-host of his they went to Romania, to Andrew Tate's home.
Yeah.
And this was before the charges and whatnot. And they had a 5-hour long conversation with him. And at this point, I personally had seen a few clips here and there of Andrew Tate. Didn't think much of him.
Yeah.
Didn't know much, but started hearing sort of like these percolations of, there's this dude who's getting famous and he's being a woman hater, misogynist, blah, blah, blah. And then he gets kicked off all of the platforms. And then I'm kind of like, well, I already listened to this guy, Patrick Bet-David, his podcast. I really like him and his interviews and stuff. And it's like, we're having a 5-hour long podcast with Andrew Tate. And I'm like, I kind of want to see like who this guy is. So I have the luxury to listen to podcasts at work all day. So I have a lot of time that other people don't have. But it's like, I listen to this 5-hour podcast. So it's like I get 5 hours to listen to this person speak about all sorts of different things, none of which is taken out of context in some 30-second video.
Yeah.
Of which I have a podcast with hours upon hours of me talking. You don't think I already have it in my head that if somebody doesn't like me and they decide to come after me because they don't like something that I say or something that I believe that they disagree with, that they can't go onto my podcast and find something that I'm saying that they could put in a 30-second clip and take out of context to demonize me?
Of course
they could.
Yeah. But not only that, even just the effort to do that, you know what I mean?
People are doing that.
I know
like
people are
crazy,
doing it, but it's just
man.
like, if you don't like something someone's saying, stop listening. it's
right.
You know what I mean?
But,
it's just
so much of what's happening in our culture now is
people
that
are just addicted to their own pain and suffering,
but
man. It's like they don't even see it.
Are painting it as if anything and everything that people say, like Jordan Peterson or Andrew Tate or anyone else who doesn't agree with left-wing politics, of which there is massive support behind only left-wing political positions in the media and the government, and largely academia has been taken over by left-wing academics pumping out activists that have gone into the media and corporations and government and shit. And the entire power structures and apparatus also, not only do they only support left-wing political positions for the most part, except for outliers like Fox News is sort of like it's like everyone, the New York Times, MSNBC, all these other major platforms are on the left side, and then you have like Fox as an outlier and some smaller like outlets that are on sort of like the right-wing side. Yeah. But all the mainstream demonizes the anything to be considered right-wing, which many people who consider themselves to be lifelong liberals who don't agree with the farthest left politics are demonized as being center or center right and now I
do remember this from the last from our last podcast, and what it was like I think people, as soon as people just grasp it sooner, that we're literally on the same side trying to make this life work for each other, like we're all gonna get along so well off. I mean, like all these little nitpicky like differences of opinion that we have with each other. It's like, is it really worth it at the end of the day? Remember that thing we learned in the class is like, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? You know what I mean? Like, I think for a vast majority of like my life, I've always strived to be happy.
I want to be right.
Like, what's that?
I want to be right.
That's a vast majority of like where I've stood in all of this that's been going on for the past few years. It's like, okay, you chose to get the vaccine, cool. Can we still hang out? You know what I mean? People like me.
No, you're unsafe.
Yeah.
You're dangerous.
People like me are okay. People like me, unvaccinated, are gonna kill their grandmothers. I've been living with my grandmother since the beginning of this year. And I guarantee you her energy levels has spiked up because her grandson is living with her.
Oh,
reminding her of all the years that we've grown up. And it's that disconnect that's still in the psyche of not everyone I meet, like my friends and everything, but like there's still people and strangers I see who are still masking up. And I have compassion. I have compassion for them. I try my best to have
compassion for them, but also it just blows my mind.
Of course, because like
it's like they're psychologically
the stupidity comes first. It's like, obviously, why are you doing that? And then I shifted immediately because like
I feel bad for them.
They're still afraid and they're still believing the narrative.
There's a combination of it being some of the like lingering effects are that people are afraid and they're still afraid, but they're also still virtue signaling and feeling like they're doing the right thing and they're a good person. They're still masking. The pandemic's not over. But like when I see people, especially even like during the height of the pandemic, you heard jokes about like when you see like a dude or a woman, whoever, but they're like in a car driving by themselves and they're wearing a mask. You're like, fuck, like these people have been traumatized and scarred. But you know,
that's where the compassion comes.
2 years on, though, that like people are still like when I see someone walking alone outside with a mask on, it makes me like feel so bad for them, and also just think it makes me feel a lot of things.
Even when with
it's like this is like insane.
Even with the forest, the smoke from the forest fires, you know, I still didn't wear a mask. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I know like that was like because I remember I was out for work. I think on the worst day.
You're fucking right wing.
The worst day it happened, you could actually feel like oxygen was sucked out of the air. It was actually pretty bad that day. I remember that. But like wearing a mask is not going to help that. You're decreasing your lung capacity to take in these toxins and filter it out. And not only that, like
depending on what mask you have,
but like, and they've even said like that is a doctor's fucking mask. You know what I mean? If you're better off going and actually getting like a mini respirator if you're gonna do that. But it's shit like that. Like I feel like in times like this, like you really do have to be your own doctor in many different ways. You know what I mean? And obviously you break your arm, go to a doctor, get a cast. But in terms of
we have to learn how to take care of ourselves preventatively to be healthy and not have to go to doctors and Western allopathic medicine to fix the problems that are already there.
Exactly. And they tried saying that at Etobicoke General Hospital there was an outbreak of COVID
recently, like a week ago.
Who is allowed in that hospital? not the unvaccinated, right? They won't see us if we're not unvaccinated. People have been denying, like, what, kidney transplants because they're not vaccinated? I guarantee you
There's still, seeing like that shit.
and it's
is
shit
just,
like that.
insane.
And for everybody knowing, like, I participated in the Freedom Convoy to speak on behalf of those who were put on leave without pay because, we were working all through the pandemic, all through the worst years of it, and all of a sudden we were a threat. And if
especially doctors and nurses,
exactly,
working through the pandemic with all the people who are sick,
exactly,
some of them got COVID, which they now have natural immunity, which has been like the best thing you can have since forever,
dude. First time,
and then they're fired from their jobs
for
refusing to take medication that they're the most fucking experts to know the actual like details of. Is this something safe that I want to take? And then them deciding not to, like, and then administrators.
The first time I got
deciding
COVID,
that they're fired.
The first time I got COVID, I think it was like the UK variant, and that shit sucked. Like I've never felt anything like that. But like I caught it again. Like I caught it in April 2021. That's when I caught it the first time, and I did catch it again about half a year later. Beat it in 2 days.
Yeah,
so you know what I mean?
Like, I got a fairly mild version. Yeah, I was down for 1 day, pretty fucking terribly.
And again, it's just how you take care of yourself. They were telling us to
being vaccinated.
There you go. And it's, at the same time, it's also how you're taking care of yourself. You know what I mean? They tell us to stay inside. You know how therapeutic it is to go lay on the grass, man. You're getting the energy from the earth going through your body,
and like shutting down outdoor fucking gyms and stuff. Like those like gyms that are at like parks and shit.
Yeah,
and it's but. I wanna go back to a couple things because like we have this is interesting because like it's so easy during a conversation to leave loops that are unclosed basically because we like.
But I think it's all tying in. I think it's all tying into this. I think it's all tying into the same thing, right? Because there's like it's believing certain narratives that just aren't true, and at the same time,
I want to just pull back to actually kind of close some loops that I'm like able to still remember because often I forget these. I've been sober for the last 4 months, so my memory might be a little bit better from not smoking weed recently.
That's good.
But so basically, like one of the things you were saying is how how when we disagree on all these things that we're talking about, one of the things that has been happening recently, and especially over the course of the pandemics, the mandates, the trucker convoy,
the Andrew Tates, the Jordan Petersons,
the Petersons, the war in Ukraine, all these things is like we have come to a place where if you disagree with someone, then at least some people are demonizing each other and unable to speak, unable to communicate, just writing people off. And the one thing that I wanted to say is that it's like, it's gotten to the point where
we are not friends.
not just that we're not friends, because that's happened to me with a few people over the course of the last couple of years, but that if someone disagrees with your position, and people on the far left and people on the far right are all equally as bad for this when you get to the edges, is that they're demonizing anyone who disagrees with their beliefs and their positions as dangerous spreaders of mis and disinformation,
which is fucking bullshit,
dude. When it's like, when there are contentious issues where people are disagreeing and have different, like wildly different beliefs about issues, then like in a free and open society with mature adults, we need to be able to talk about these things that we disagree with, to have debates, and to present the evidence and to persuade one another, especially the people in the middle of all of this stuff that they don't pay deep attention like the fucking crazy people that are radicalized on both sides do. It's like the people in the middle especially need to have access to open discussions and information on both sides and debates to make up their minds.
Their own minds.
Of
course. Yeah. Without the influence of anyone else telling, oh man, it's just ridiculous, dude. Again, like, I think for me, it all comes down to be a good person, know how to communicate, don't, you know what I mean? Just, again, the sooner we all realize, sorry, I did a number at all the fruit there.
You're good, man. You're good. I got more. Fruits for the guests.
But no, I've been down the same road. Just like, 10, 12 years of friendship. And honestly, it's just like, oh, this, it takes, and I just think that's ridiculous. If it was a series of things that have piled up where like, okay, this person was a good friend at first, now they're not because of X, Y, Z, maybe you not being there for me when I really needed you, or like if there was like an amount of like situations, I could understand that. But like of like 1 or 2 disagreements on political things, not even just life choices or interpersonal relationship kind of stuff, we have a disagreement and all of a sudden, bye 10 years, all those memories, you know what I mean?
Friend of
It's
20
just like,
plus years who recently essentially told me to have a nice life,
which is ridiculous,
because
man. Like, come on.
because she doesn't agree with things that I've been posting on social media. And I even like, I always like, some of my favorite people are the people I disagree with most, and that I know
Nice.
I know we can have disagreements and it not threaten our friendship, and we can be like just brutally honest with one another even while we're having disagreements.
Yeah.
And we know that it's like we're allowed to have disagreements even if they get like to debates and if they get intense, and it doesn't mean we can't be friends. It's like part of the reason I love those relationships most is that I get to learn from somebody who thinks most differently than I think about certain things, and I have to get my beliefs questioned, and I have to be put up against defending my position, which makes me understand my position more and question my own position, and to like essentially question this other person's position if I disagree with what they're saying. And it only makes both of us stronger, and I think it actually makes the relationship stronger.
Agreed.
In certain ways, right?
I actually said that to a couple of my best friends. I think the best kinds of friendships are the ones where like, you know, you're great, you're compatible, and once in a while you have a hiccup, but it makes you stronger as friends. If you both are willing to understand and really I guess willing to agree that this relationship makes me stronger and makes me more connect with my life a lot more, those are the ones are definitely worth keeping. I've had that with a few of my best friends, one of which who I've known for about 15 plus years, and the second last time I saw him, we just kind of see it in our faces, like we have issues of this thing that we're talking around. We're trying to have pleasantries through dinner. But I called him.
There's like some unspoken stuff.
There is, because you can
right?
see it, right? There is. And then like I called him the day before his birthday. I'm like, we gotta hash it out, man. I'm just gonna say what's on my end, and you know, just like you gotta set the tone, right? Which I did. It's just like, I'm always in your corner. I'm always someone who's gonna be in your corner. I just hope you don't think I'm a shitty person just because of where I stand on the whole thing. And sure enough, like, you know, like we had it out, and we're still best friends. He's still one of my best friends.
Like the best. It's like,
but like we didn't talk for like, there was like before all this shit happened, there was a certain way we'd like just like banter back and forth. You know what I mean? It's the banter has definitely died down, but it's coming back because we had that conversation.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's what's happened. You know, like I've had similar experiences with a few people over different issues over the course of the last few years, and I'm always explicitly state that I would love to, like, you cannot understand each other's positions based off what you're posting online on your story on Instagram, or what I'm posting online on my story on Instagram.
Exactly.
Is a sliver into who I am, what I believe, what my position,
that much,
what my
exactly
actual position is. Even though my friend may rightfully so think that I believe XYZ based on what I've posted, that may be true, but it doesn't mean
it's a small fraction.
The depth of my understanding, or what I actually think, that may actually be completely counter to those things that I have posted.
Yeah.
If we actually had a conversation. So I always invite people, especially if they express like they don't like what I'm posting or they disagree. I'm like, let's have a call, because like we understand,
because people will make up their minds immediately for days on end, right?
And we understand. I think many people understand very well. I think the context that people understand it best is that text-based communication, by like texting over phone or communication on some app or email, is, if there's any conflict whatsoever, even of the lowest level, the way that we read it in our head is so much worse than it's actually meant.
Of course.
And so that especially rings true, like when you're having sort of like conflict with an intimate partner.
Yeah.
A la like relationship ending conversations via text kind of thing. It's like every single thing you say comes across as being so much worse than it's actually meant to be. Of course, because
like you can never convey. Basically, you can never convey or grasp tonalities or emotion.
And so our brain naturally, I think, this is an experience that I've had many people confirm is the case for them as well. Is that we just sort of, our brain manufactures it to come across as like more mean-spirited and condescending than it's meant to be. And so when I've had some of these interactions with people, I have said, like, we can't get into any depth via texting each other on Instagram or text messages. Not only can we not get into depth, because we're disagreeing, the tone is going to be absolutely taken incorrectly.
Yeah. It's better just to call and... Yeah. It's better just to call and actually hash
And so
it
it's
out,
like,
right?
let's have a call. Like, we can have a 5-minute call that will get through more than we'll be able to text in an hour.
Yeah.
Right?
Because everything
with
is,
proper hearing the other person's
exactly.
voice.
Like, everything is energy, dude. It becomes like a buildup of shit over time that if you guys don't meet in the middle immediately right away, and I was telling this to my friend, because like we start making up stories that we believe. And I was doing that to him, and I actually like confessed that to him. Like, I started making up shit.
The caricature you make of the other person.
It's you're building it off of nothing, and basically just like, a bad feeling that not so much a bad feeling that you have, but it's just like because the communication isn't being made, you're making up stories about each other. And like to be able to tell that to your friend, like, because I haven't talked to you, I've been making up stories in my head that you're thinking about me like this. But like once you at least vocalize that, I like on the phone, I felt how much closer we got.
Well, and how wrong your story was.
Exactly. How stupid I immediately felt for holding on to that story.
For my friends, I've had a few of these interactions. I'm always like, we should not allow disagreements to affect our friendship or be unable to talk to one another, and not under the context of this terrible communication method, text-based, about complicated issues that at the very least I've had back and forth voice notes with some friends,
which is better.
That is better,
much
but it's
better.
still not the same as having a live conversation. Because you're still responding to each other, like, not in real time, and you're not seeing each other.
Our phones are very convenient. You know what I mean? It's not the way we're supposed to be communicating. No matter it's convenience.
No, it's causing so many issues for that reason. Yeah, right.
Basically, everyone has these issues because we have a cell phone. Basically, you know what I mean? I'm yearning for the day, honestly, when I'm I want to say old and gray. It's kind of starting already, but I'm gonna play baseball with my phone. I'm gonna have someone.
I don't see
preferably my
single
partner.
Fucking gray hair. Your hair looks
I plucked them all out.
Black. Oh, okay.
That's why.
I'm like, what do you mean it's starting?
I'm gonna have my partner pitch me my phone. I'm gonna swing it as hard as I can. I'm never getting another cell phone, man.
Yeah,
never again.
It's tough. Like I've felt like that, but I just like recently ended up getting like a new phone, but
it's fun again.
But to to what we're saying about these the way these conflicts arise, and like you're saying, it's like I know for a fact that I am making up a story about this person, and they are making up a story, a caricature of who I am and what I believe, based on this really tiny window into me and what my beliefs are, based on something I'm posting on social media. And we're allowing that story and that caricature to grow to the point that some people are willing to cut off 10 plus, 15 plus, 20 plus year friendships off of an extremely low resolution lack of data, basically. And I'm always like, let's have a call. Like, spare me an hour so we can get the story straight and see that actually what you think you're perceiving about me is actually not accurate.
This is actually, this is coming to me just now. I think like lots of people just don't want to be like, people don't want to feel stupid. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no,
the
it's huge.
The minute, because
people
like,
want to be right.
Yeah.
People's egos are getting in the way like crazy.
That, because like I've had many moments where like, okay, I was wrong. And then whoever I was having the debate with at the time, it's okay, dude. We're still friends.
A lot of people
we're still friends. You know what I mean? It's
are
just
like very like incapable of doing that, or they haven't developed that skill as a mature adult to like have the humility to put your ego aside, to like really listen to someone that you disagree with and try to actually hear what they're saying, rather than destroy the caricature that you've made up in your head of what they're saying.
Exactly.
And to admit that maybe you're wrong, or to like not have your beliefs be so rigid about things because they're emotional, because we have so much emotion attached to these things, to say like, oh, you know what, like I was wrong about what I was thinking about this thing, or what I was thinking about you. And I love having those conversations. Like I love having because I know I get stuck in my ego. I know I want to be right. I know I like to be right. I know I'm fighting for my beliefs because I want to win. Yeah. Because there's a part of me that wants to do that, and that I'm like trying to fight against a ghost of the caricature and the story that I've made up about this person is like, it's like a ghost. It's not real.
It's not a real thing,
right? Yeah. And it's like only by having those conversations and the humility to actually like
to just admit you were wrong, man. It literally can be as simple as that. Because I remember my transition into, like, you know, through conversations with
Are
other
you
people.
a they, them now?
Well, I am a raging lesbian, I will tell you that.
Okay.
I will tell you that
I
much.
believe you.
But no, this, where was I going with this? Oh, hello. She's cute.
My dog, he's not talking about a human. He just said they just said they're a raging lesbian.
Oh my god, that's funny. But no, it's just, I think, like, I remember my transition, like, I can still remember there's, like, a time frame. I think it was, like, either, like, my 27th year where I was still holding on to, like, no, everyone else is not stupid, but everyone else is fucked up in their head.
Because we all are.
Yeah, we are, but at the
in
same
different
time,
ways.
Through conversations with other friends who have been able to show me, like, yeah, sometimes you get things wrong, and that's okay. It's like, why do you make it mean X, Y, and Z so much?
Well,
and for
because
me,
people attach their identity to their beliefs.
Well, not so much that for me, but at the same time, you also grow up in, I've grown up in an environment where if I'm wrong or if I make a mistake, I get berated for it, you know what I mean, by my family, and making me feel that much more stupid and shit. So you don't really pay attention to how that affects you in the real world or having conversations with people. But through doing, you know, inner work, personal development courses like you and I have taken part in, like you realize where those things come from. So like me being able to see situations where, holy shit, I've blown that out of proportion. It's trapped energy of how you think something is. And then that, like I said, that little bit of a perspective change can release so much like just freeing feelings in you, and it's just the being vulnerable that will set you free and help you move forward through like the tough conversations you need to have in life. Because like we're not perfect. We think we know what we know, but there's a whole, you know, like infinite universe of things we don't know. And I think like the best thing for me like going forward is to stay curious about things that I'm interested in, and to know that, hey, I can always learn something new in life. And you know what I mean? I never want to cap my intelligence and thinking I know everything I need to know. I'm better than everyone. I don't need to know anything else, because that's never going to happen. I'm always going to learn new things.
For you,
yeah.
Speak for yourself. I know everything.
Which is
I
fine.
know everything. I have nothing left to learn.
Which is fine, man. For people, it's just, you know what I mean. I think it's just like that should not like stop you from getting together with someone and experiencing and exchanging, like, you know, what we're here to experience, which is life. You know what I mean? And it's just like so many people have cut themselves off from so many loving relationships based on what people who are not their family, who are not their friends, told them to feel about people who have an opposing view and an opposing opinion. And it's so disheartening to see, because like, I mean, I've always known, like, to some degree, like, this bullshit, this divide, these, you know, this power, this evil power has been in the world, and I've been able to maneuver through it. But because all of this stuff happened within the past few years, like, I'm in the fight now. And now I have, like, sturdy legs I have my feet planted on the floor in who I am and what I'm offering to the world. And if people don't recognize or vibe with that, cool. I'm not the one missing out. You know what I mean? It's just that's for me. That's the story of my life, ladies and gentlemen. That's just trying to restore the one reality I've always grown with, and that I'm always been able to play and have fun with. And it's just as much there as people think it's not. And it all comes back for me. The sooner we realize we're all in this together, trying to have fun, love each other, experience these new things without the external people telling us how to think and how to feel, we're gonna experience and gain so many more beautiful things that life has to offer. It's all around us. It's just if we choose to get angry, upset, it is choices we're making. You know what I mean? We may get triggered, and it may be something we're automatically stuck in, but you can choose to step out of it.
Yeah, well, we're obviously being influenced externally, but we're also making choices.
Yeah,
every moment of every day, and
you can make it a conscious choice to yell at someone, and then later realize maybe that was a trigger and apologize. You know what I mean? There's still little things
stay stuck in being right.
Exactly.
And it was their fault that you yelled at them because you disagreed with something they said or did or whatever. Right? There's these dynamics. It's we're
Ben Shapiro actually said something really good about a student who basically called him woke. And everything.
Ben Shapiro was woke.
There was a 5-minute clip, and he was basically saying, I'm not going to reiterate the whole thing, but the answer is makes good decisions going forward, which is what we all should be doing. You know what I mean? In whatever way that looks like to you, it's how we're going to make each other better and how you're going to make your life better. And you should always be doing it for yourself before somebody else. I know I've had some friends saying, oh, something you posted made me uncomfortable. I'm like, for you? No, for the people who I may know.
It's like, what?
What? And something I like to use is also the airbag analogy on the planes. In case of emergency, what are you supposed to do when the bag comes down?
Yeah, the oxygen mask.
You put it across your face first before you give it to someone else. And for years of doing that for other people, 2023, honestly, I can wholeheartedly say...
You mean doing others first rather than yourself.
This year 2023 is the first year in my life, actually 2020 as well, but in my life where I'm finally putting that oxygen mask on over myself. And the freedom that's come with it, because I've wasted years people pleasing and trying to convince people I'm a good friend you can have, man. And it's just it's not. Well, yeah,
because you sacrifice yourself to put other people first.
You diminish your own, and you diminish your own light in so many different ways by doing that. And you don't need to anymore. And I know there's so many people in the world who are like me, who feel like they can't do that for a split second. Put themselves first before someone else they care about. It's you need to, because it's your life, it's your reality.
Yeah, well, and it's the idea, you got to fill your cup up to be able to pour into other people from a full cup, not trying to pour into other people from a cup that's constantly empty.
Exactly.
That it's you have no energy for yourself, you have no boundaries, you have no time for yourself, for your needs, because you're too busy worrying about other people and their needs and not upsetting people. Because so much of the dynamics of everything that we're talking about is people playing out childish triggers and childish responses. Like you said, you grew up in a family where if you did something wrong, you would be shouted at. You would be shouted at, and you would be berated, and you would be made to feel bad and wrong, and you would get in trouble. Yep. And people don't so many people, and what is at the heart of so much of the conflict that we're seeing is those types of dynamics, because those are the types of environments that literally probably a significant majority portion of the population has grown up in, because life is hard, parenting is hard. I'm not a parent, but I know it is, because I know how it was for my parents. I know how it is for some of my friends with children. I have nieces and nephews. I know, it's in my case, I know that the experience that I had, similar to what you're saying, is the lack of a healthy communication in general, but ability to discipline me as a child when I did something wrong, or to communicate through disagreement. Like, I argued with my parents a lot because I wanted like logical, rational reasons for why they wanted me to do something if I didn't want to do it. And like, stereotypically was the answer for so many people that they experienced was that the parents would have the ability or the bandwidth, the energy, the time, whatever, to like explain to me as a kid or whatever age I was. They just kind of screamed at me, like, because I fucking told you to, right? Which is horrible.
It's because I said it.
Right,
because I said so.
Because I fucking said so. Which, like, I did a program all about learning, like, about, like, the, like, childhood development and, like, trauma if you don't get your needs met in all these different capacities, and the, you know, trying to heal as an adult from certain things that really deeply affected you as a kid.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that said that, like, that's one of the worst things, like, a parent can do, is to not have the ability to like, communicate with your kid, whatever age they are, like a human being. And obviously there are outliers. Like, some kids, they're stereotypically, they just ask why like a million times in a row, and you eventually like, you can't keep giving them an answer. And, you know, parents are tired, they're out of energy, they're at the fucking end of their string with what it is that they're dealing with work and finances and relationship and life, and everything,
especially
right?
new parents now, man, with all the, you know, with all the external things they're also like not so much distracted by, but like just the way of living. This is like exactly what I was bringing it back to, like, you know, my parents and our grandparents. They had just the ease that they had back then, man. It's just it's crazy. And at the same time, it's things like that make me grounded and just keep me humble. Like, I'm so grateful for the life that I have. We may be in a fucked up situation with our country, but at the same time, I have so much to be grateful for. And, like, when you don't pay attention to those things nearly enough, then you start nitpicking at other shit that you don't like about your life. And it's just like, you're in the steering wheel of what you choose to consume. You know what I mean? Sorry, the driver's seat, not the steering wheel. Sorry, you're in the driver's seat of your life.
One with the steering wheel.
The steering wheel.
You are the steering
and, like,
wheel. I mean, that tracks. That makes sense.
I told
you are the steering wheel.
And I was telling this to my dad once. I'm just like, listen, like, it's just like people listen through the filter of like how they perceive it. You know what I mean? He was trying to get me on something like I said to my cousin that was, you know, my dad heard as rude. I'm like, well, I didn't really mean it like that. But because of, like, I'm giving him my perspective that, like, you heard it, not how I delivered it.
Yeah.
It challenged
you heard
him.
It, not how I meant it.
It challenged him, and then he was still trying to defend his position. It's like, Dad,
but
no.
That's the thing, right? and it's like, all of these dynamics are, you know, like, one of the most challenging things in life about being a human being is communication in relationship with other human beings, even with ourselves.
Yeah,
right?
no, I've had moments like that, especially with myself. Yeah, for sure.
And that's one of the biggest things is that, like, we're able to make, like, Joe Rogan says it in like a funny way, like, we're able to make sounds with our vocal cords that make just weird sounds come out of our mouth that we've attached all this meaning to, so I can tell you what's happening in my brain, and you can go, the sound can just go in your ear, and all the meaning you have, like the shared meaning that we have attached to these sounds goes into your brain, and then you're supposed to comprehend what it is that I sent. And often there's, like you're saying, like, your dad hears something that's different because it's filtered through his own filters, that's actually not what you sent.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And then and then he says, like, is this what you're saying? You're like, I kind of get why you think that's what I'm saying, but it's actually not what I'm saying. Yeah. Right? And
but there's still that residue of, but I think you meant it like that.
Right. And that's like one of the things that, like, there's so many breakdowns in communication where people aren't hearing what each other are saying. Yeah. It's like, it's hard enough to hear what someone else is actually trying to say to you and comprehend it
in the way that they're meaning it to be comprehended, even if you're actively trying to listen well and understand. But with the conflicts we're having, people aren't trying to listen to understand.
And I think this is the exact teachings that need to be in our school systems. Teaching kids how to understand and better control their thoughts. And just like, you know, there's differences between
trying to fucking indoctrinate kids, VJ.
Yeah, well, like that's the that's the shit we should be teaching them. How to like communicate your emotions,
self-control and communication and emotional regulation,
tonalities and everything, and just like knowing how to effectively communicate. You're not feeling good, or you're not feeling well, or it's just, and you know, just not being able to blame your parents for, because you know our parents are always doing their best. You know what I mean? They've done their best. Yeah. Well, I don't berate my parents anymore once I grasp that understanding. But like teaching kids how to like properly and effectively communicate and manage their thoughts in case like before they spiral out of control, that is something that's essential for them to create the lives that they want. I think that's something we should be teaching, and yes, not indoctrinating kids with the pronouns. You want to teach kids about the pronouns? Wait till high school. Why do you gotta get into kindergarten kids who are just getting a grasp on life and confuse them even more? Wait till high school.
I hear you. Like, that's like a whole nother story we could get into. Let me pause for one moment.
Cool.
So yeah, that could be like very in-depth
we're gonna like not get
conversation.
Into it.
So we're gonna what do you like? We're gonna put that on like the sidecar.
Yeah.
But you know, when you said something about like tonality, even it made me think like, have you ever heard how like, I don't know if it's in Mandarin or Cantonese, one of the like trying to learn Chinese like languages, they have like some words that are the same word for like 5 different meanings that mean something totally different.
I've heard of that.
Based on the tonality that's used. Obviously what's surrounding them matters as well. Yeah. But some things are so like dependent on tiny like what we would perceive as an outsider who's trying to learn the language or doesn't understand it or haven't learned it from like growing up. I've heard like these examples that like you could like say something to like your parent that like is like something nice or the same word with the tiny inflection that's different, that would be something like totally opposite or or like something that's totally like terrible. I'm like, fuck, like we think it's hard in English, man. Could you imagine that? People are like try to like better get ready to learn Chinese because fucking China's gonna take over the world as the U.S. empire falls. But
fuck that, man. The day that happens won't be long and gone.
Well, hopefully,
yes. Fingers crossed.
My understanding is it's highly unlikely.
That's why I don't want to have kids, man. Like kids were never in my sight line. I don't think they ever will be. It was never part of my life plan. I don't know. I've just never been. I mean, like I'm open to
change though, and guys obviously aren't on the biological time clock that women are.
The way these are. Yeah.
Like how old are you?
32.
So I'm 36, and it's not until around your age that because I'm not on the physical limits of a biological time clock like a woman. Yeah. But I'm like, if I do want to have kids,
you can have it at any age. Really,
right? But it's like I don't want to have a fucking infant when I'm in my 40s.
Of course not. No, who the fuck would want that?
It's like if I
Robert De Niro apparently wanted that. He's 76 and he got someone pregnant.
Al Pacino, I think Al Pacino got his 29-year-old fucking wife or girlfriend pregnant, and he's like, I think he's 82 or some shit.
82, holy shit!
I don't know. Here, let's see. Do you need to take a break at all, like washing break
I'm good.
anything? Good. Hey Siri, how old is Al Pacino?
Al Pacino is 83.
83.
Holy shit, bro.
So he just got his 29-year-old wife or girlfriend pregnant. That's apparently at like 82. Can you fucking believe that shit, Gracie? Yeah. Okay, so if you don't need a break, there was another open loop that is still on my mind that I want to just jump back to. As you said, all of these things are obviously related, but we're having like a lot of issues communicating with each other, not you and I right now, but as people, as a community, as a society. And one of the things that you were saying that I very much agree with is like, if we're going to solve any of the issues that we have, especially the most contentious issues, it's not going to be by demonizing each other and dehumanizing each other and trying to destroy the ghost caricature story that's untrue and inaccurate that we've constructed in our own minds of like who these other people that we're othering and you know, putting into out groups and stuff like that. It's like the sooner we find common ground and common goals and find that actually the common ground, even in the midst of differences still being present, is like the only way we're going to solve problems, heal the divides, get over the differences, because we do have common ground, we do have common goals, and one is to not destroy our fucking society and civilization, and to, you know, have, as humans tend to do, mass outbreaks of violence, which as things get more destabilized is more prone to happen, as we see, right? And it's like even if we have differences, it's like we have to be able to work together on common goals despite those differences, in the face of those differences. And that we have to come back together. And you know, a lot of people talk about how the reason for this especially is that the people in power have always used the tactic of divide the population to conquer
Divide and conquer.
In order to make us fight amongst ourselves when we're more similar to each other compared to, like, you know, the most far left person and the most far right person on the political spectrum who are in a similar income and economic and tax bracket are infinitely more alike than they are with the billionaire class, right? And it's the billionaire class who owns the corporations, who owns the banks, who owns the fucking governments, who corrupts the entire regulatory system, that are the ones that are at the positions of wealth and power and influence, who continue to make more money for themselves and to keep those places of wealth and power and influence by keeping us divided amongst ourselves and fighting each other instead of fighting the people who are essentially common enemy, basically, right? And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is the course of human history, time and time again,
as we know it,
right? And so many people are fighting in the weeds about so much shit that, like, largely in a lot of ways doesn't matter, but then in a lot of ways does. That's one of the craziest things, like one of the most challenging things for me is, like, when you're talking about, like, and when I'm right now talking about, like, we've got to come back together. We've got to see our similarities and what the common ground and common goals are, and get past our differences so that we can work towards those common goals, so that we can thrive together, or we will destroy each other if we don't do that. And if we focus on the differences, we march towards destruction and destabilization rather than stabilization and unity and you know, having a society that is able to be tolerant of differences.
It is a tough road ahead, man, but it's still just as much possible as
it's possible, of course. But one of the most difficult parts about it is that, on the one hand, like we're both sort of expressing, is that it's almost like we have to look past the differences and work towards the commonalities and the common humanity and the common goals. But then at the same time, it's like there are real problems that are really divided, as far as, like, what's happening in some political realms, what's happening in the schools with the indoctrination of ideologies of the youth that people disagree with, what's happening with, you know, there's so many divides on so many different issues. Like, you know, people are extremely divided about, you know, the overturning of Roe v. Wade and abortion rights, and now it's gone back to the states, and with gender medicine and abortion access is being is being like, there are states that are banning stuff. There are states that are signing into law to be sanctuary states. Like, there are real issues that there are real differences that people actually have to fight about, and they have to,
for sure.
find a way to, either way, still like find a way to like live with each other, right?
Yeah.
But what I was saying, so yeah, like we do have to come together, but we are divided, and we have to like find ways to like actually like work those divides out as well. Like they can't be entirely ignored.
Of course not. But like the way we're doing it so far is not working. No, it's just a clusterfuck of shouting. It's all it is, really.
Absolute clusterfuck.
Yeah.
So one of the open loops that I want to go back to, especially because you said like you're not super familiar with Jordan Peterson, so I want to like flush this out a little bit more for you and for whoever's listening who maybe they know and maybe they like Jordan Peterson and maybe they don't. Maybe they don't like Jordan Peterson, but for those who, especially who think they know who he is and don't like him, but are willing to still listen and consider their position maybe ill-informed or under-informed. Basically, what happened that caused so much controversy with him and really blew him up into the spotlight was in 2016, the Canadian government changed the Human Rights Code to include misgendering and gendered language into the human rights
in
laws.
2016 this was
2016.
done. Wow.
And because Jordan Peterson, especially knowing his lifetime history of being a psychology professor and a clinical psychologist and deeply studying the most horrific things that humans did to each other in the 20th century, so just from 1900 to 2000, the world wars, communism in China and Russia, between 100 to 200 million, we'll never really know because the estimates are vast, but between 1 and 200 million people were murdered by their governments, and that was in the Nazi concentration camps and the Soviet Union, and it was also done through starvation, both accidental because of bad policy, and on purpose, right? So this is a person that cares deeply about us not going down those paths again, and he has the knowledge to understand how it's happened, at least in a deeper capacity than most people. Yeah. And that he, some people say that he's this controversial figure that likes being in the spotlight and mired in controversy, but he's explicitly said time and time again that he doesn't like being in conflict. He doesn't like fighting, but he knows that if you don't speak up now and say what you believe to be true and stand up for what you actually believe in and against things that you don't, he's like, people say he's courageous. He's like, I'm not courageous. I just know what happens down the road if I don't speak up now. Yeah, is that much. It festers and it grows, and the problem becomes 10 times worse and that much more likely to turn into absolute fucking chaos down the road if people let it get to there. Yeah, basically, right? And so he has made the distinction that there is a difference between, like, he thinks, and this is like, I would say that this is a true statement that's borne out by if you know anything about history, is that like we don't have free societies without free speech. If we're not able to speak publicly about what we believe to be true because censorship or fear of retribution in one way or another from either social consequences from other people or from legislated consequences from governments, then we don't have freedom. We don't live in a free society.
No, we don't.
And so he thinks that actually applies in some capacity to even hate speech laws, but that what you can't say is understandable in many contexts, that it's acceptable. So you think of two contexts: that you cannot incite hatred and spark violence towards an individual or a identifiable group of people, or else that's against hate speech laws. And that's like right on, like that should be like that. And you do not have the free speech to yell fire in a crowded theater, for instance, because that will cause chaos. People stampede each other to death in situations like that.
Oh, dude, people stampede each other to death over fucking Black Friday.
Or concerts. And yeah, exactly, right? So there are reasonable limits to speech when it comes to hate speech laws. But the reason that he spoke out against Bill C-16, which happened to be in 2016, the change to the Human Rights Code to include that, like, not using someone's preferred pronouns and preferred gender could now be determined to be hate speech against someone. The difference is that hate speech laws rightfully limit what you can't say. Like, you can't say yell fire in a crowded theater.
Yeah.
You can't incite violence towards someone or a identifiable group of people. But when you demand the use of speech, that's the opposite.
Yes.
And it is a distinction that a lot of people don't understand, and they think it doesn't matter. They think it's the same thing, but it's absolutely not the same thing.
Which I also think is at the same time, it's just like, I call you by your name. You know what I mean?
But what he's saying though is
no, I get what he's saying. It's just like I feel like a lot. This is also why I just don't find myself in like this topic.
Yeah, you're like, I just wouldn't use the pronouns at all.
No, it's just like, do you find yourself in situations where people are identifying you like that? You know what I mean?
No, you don't, because you only talk about someone as a he or she when you're talking about them in like the third person to someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't say he to you to refer to you, or she.
Of course not, but like
they,
I think like a simpler
which is
thing.
Part of the thing why it's crazy is to avoid the whole language.
Avoid the whole thing, just use the person's name in third person.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But the problem really comes in is when governments start enacting policies that require the change of law that could limit someone's ability to utilize free speech, could cause them to be fined, could cause them to be imprisoned.
And then the people on the receiving end of that think they have power.
Right, but that's where people take power, right?
Yep.
And this is the kinds of things that have happened in the past that if you understand where this could lead, and obviously it has been shown that he was correct in what has happened in recent years because of these types of changes, is that hate speech is one thing. This is what's called compelled speech, where you're being forced to say something in particular, or else you risk getting some sort of like consequences if you don't. And there's actually like, we don't have, in my understanding, laws against what is called compelled speech. It is something that actually there is a precedent against in like the UK, but not here, basically.
Yeah.
And so basically he's making that distinction. And so the controversy, everyone is basically like, he's a hateful, bigoted, transphobic person who is just doesn't want to, he's intolerant, and he doesn't want to use someone's preferred pronouns because he's evil and he's a hateful person. And he's like, look, like, I'll use people's preferred pronouns as a courtesy most times. Like, if a student comes to me and is genuine and says like, hey, I identify this way, I would appreciate it if you refer to me this way, he's probably going to do that, but he's not going to do it because he has to by law.
He's going to do it because he wants to. Well, he's going to do it because he wants to.
But he's also going to do it if he feels that that person is being genuine, not if he feels that that person is abusing the law,
being
being vindictive to force his... compel his speech.
The fact that he'd be willing to do it, that should be enough.
But that there is a distinction that people will and do take advantage of things like that if it becomes an opening for them to do so. Because some people are fucked up and they're narcissists, and they'll utilize power in any way that they can. And so much of the people who are pushing these types of changes are literally critiquing all of society, that it is a power struggle
Yeah,
you know, the
pretty much.
patriarchy, the white supremacy, the entire system is this power struggle, right? And so he's been painted with this brush in that really limited way where you could listen to an hour-long lecture of his, you could listen to him talk on a podcast for 2 or 3 hours, and there will be next to nothing that has anything to do with that entire set of issues, and that he clearly is not this like intolerant person, but like we're saying is like people create this caricature, people make this story based on this extremely limited amount of information or evidence, and then disregard the entirety of the rest of this person, right? And so it's like, and I've experienced that, and it's like it's so wrong and it's so sad in a lot of ways. But like you're saying as well, is like, you know, you have to get some type of thick skin for yourself to have your own boundaries, to stand up for what you believe in.
There was this one video I saw of Jordan Peterson that really just solidified my impression of him. It was a trans woman who transitioned into a male, then back to female. And I remember
Chloe Cole.
Yeah, and I remember watching that, and you know what she said was the reason why she went back into a woman is because she knew she was running away from something deeper. And like her admitting that to someone like Jordan Peterson, I saw the transaction that happened as soon as she admitted that. She was about to have a mental breakdown and cry. And what I saw in
She's
him
18.
and what I saw in him, what I saw in him was that he caught her like mentally and physically. She was about to break down and cry, and he let her know that I understand you and it's not your fault that you didn't know this. Well, if more people saw what he did for that little girl, you know what I mean, they'd have a lot more of appreciation and just understanding that like he is not what they're making him out to be. The fact that he caught that girl, he probably stopped her from committing suicide.
I personally, like, I've seen that interview.
You know what I mean?
I don't know
like,
the exact interaction within that interview that you're referencing. I wouldn't.
That's how I witnessed it, though.
Right,
you know what I
right.
mean? It's just,
sure.
Like, he was,
and like, I wouldn't like personally say that, but I understand what you're saying.
Probably,
especially that he certainly isn't the demon super Nazi that he's been painted to be.
But kids are also committing suicide at that rate too, right? At that age.
Oh yeah,
because because they're not happy with themselves.
One of my favorite parts of recollecting that interview in particular was that, and like, this is coming from a place of like, I've done a lot of therapy for myself, right? And I know what therapy is and is supposed to be, and he breaks that down in many like instances on different lectures or podcasts and stuff. But in this interaction with this young, what's called a detransitioner, she transitioned and then she detransitioned, which the entire, you know, love bombing trans activist community demonizes,
which is so fucking
detransitioners,
stupid.
And fucking like
how can you
them like
how can you not
shit.
have compassion for someone who like felt it was a wrong decision to make?
Oh yeah.
How do you not have compassion?
Well, because there's all these mental gymnastics that people are doing.
Mental gymnastics. That's a good way of putting it.
No, it is absolutely mental gymnastics. Like, one of the reasons that people say that like don't support detransitioners but support transition and support the pride and trans community and stuff is the only reason they detransitioned is because of the hate that they've got from other people who hate trans people and are transphobic, and their own family's lack of support from their own network, which is just utter nonsense. And the interaction that she has with Jordan is he says, I'm going to tell you what should have happened in therapy with you to go to the bottom of what the actual issues were that you were faced with, that you're now expressing and admitting that you detransitioned because there was other underlying issues that you were dealing with. One being which she's on the autism spectrum. That's one of which there's actually many people who are being transed and wrapped up into this ideology is that they're somewhere on the autism spectrum and they're susceptible to black and white thinking.
Yeah.
And they're susceptible to believing these things. And he lays out like this is what we should have done. This is what I would have done as your therapist. This is what your therapist should have done. This is what we learn as therapists. That therapists are now completely neglecting their duty to do their fucking jobs and actually give you real therapy. But another reason that this is so fucked up is, like the changing of the human rights law, there also has been any therapeutic, exploratory anything from a therapist or a doctor of any sort in the West, in Canada, and all sorts of other Western countries has been deemed to be called conversion therapy and made illegal. So the actual clinicians, doctors, and therapists have had their hands tied that if they do not simply affirm, they're required by law now to affirm the gender identity and the transition and the putting them on the path to medicalization and transition of these like most vulnerable people, many of which are on the autism spectrum, many of which are dealing with depression and anxiety and abuse, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, a lot of them, like a lot of them, like we're talking like in some studies 80% of women and like 90% of men, or like really high numbers, are actually homosexuals. Yeah. So it's like they're if these doctors, if these therapists, clinicians don't affirm, if they try to get to the bottom of these other issues that these people are dealing with, then by the heavy hand of law being changed, it's considered conversion therapy, which they could have their licenses removed for. So again, like there's these really profoundly wrong and powerful mechanisms that have been put in place to sort of strong arm people to follow this ideology, even if they don't want to, basically, which is something that Jordan Peterson gets demonized as being transphobic because he's talking about how wrong that is and how bad that is.
Just opposing the power, man. That's all it is.
And how many really, truly terrible social things that can and will lead to, because it has in history. If you know anything about history, I'll give you an example. One of the things I've heard him talk about many times is that young women are susceptible to psychogenic epidemics. Bulimia, anorexia, cutting. Young women, when they hit puberty and they become susceptible to more negative emotion, largely because they can now become, they're likely to experience sexual and other violence from men more frequently once puberty hits, because that's when men hit puberty and they're raging with testosterone and we become sexually active and viable to have children. And all of these animalistic things start happening, right? So women become more susceptible to negative emotions because they have to be more perceptive of and aware of dangers around them. And a man can rape a woman and then leave, and a woman is left with the baby to gestate for 9 months and then take care of it, right? So there's all these like really deep biological, psychological mechanisms that are at play here that also lead to women and young girls being more susceptible to psychological, he calls it psychogenic epidemics. And we have data on this for the last 300 years. We have studies, we have waves of these epidemics that primarily or disproportionately affect young women. They get anorexia. They get bulimia. They have body issues. Oh, fuck.
No.
I almost never hear the water running, ever.
It's your neighbors upstairs, right?
Yeah, and it happened another time when I was recording the intro.
Yeah.
And I was like, what even is that? Like, I've been living here for a year and I've almost never
sounds like the sink.
Heard that. But it was so weird because it was like I literally don't have conscious recognition that I ever hear the water, but I'm hearing it and it's so fucking loud for some reason. Like, but anyway, so it's like
And there we go again.
There we go again. We're gonna hold out on the water. I'm gonna pause and save.
Shit, it's already 5:30.
Yeah, we'll wrap up. We'll wrap up soon. I'll just keep going if the water goes again. Sorry, neighbors upstairs are doing something.
It's all
dishes or
good,
something.
whatever.
But
Being pretty good considering how far we've been going.
yeah. So it's like there are biological reasons and psychological reasons, which are also based on biology, why women are subject to get wrapped up into psychological epidemics of a variety of sorts, and that we have data showing that this is the case, and that there's waves, including things like multiple personality disorder, or thinking they have multiple personality disorder when they don't.
Yep.
For the last 300 years, we have the data on this. And so one of the things he said is that if you change these laws that he fought against, like both of these changes that I've mentioned, with like the changes to the Human Rights Code regarding pronoun use, and the changes to doctors and therapists being able to actually do their job and it being considered conversion therapy, which it's absolutely not, that this absolutely will lead to young women being wrapped up into this ideology and getting transed at a disproportionate rate. He has been proven to be correct about all of these things, right?
And yet the war still continues.
And yet still there are people who slander and demonize him and ignore the reality of the evidence and the data that we have, not least including that Norway, the UK, Sweden, and Finland have done systematic reviews of all of the evidence of the studies regarding gender medicine, or the affirmative care model, and systematic reviews is the strongest, most reproducible evidence base to make decisions for what's called evidence-based medicine. And these countries have banned these treatments for minors, and or put them into only being able to be used in the context of a clinical trial, which this was being done without having happened, right? And this is all in the tail end too of like the pandemic and all the craziness that happened with like the racial uprising and Black Lives Matter and the lockdowns and mandates and stuff. Like we have sort of these things that have stacked on top of one another, right? But it's like there are a group of people that are absolutely and utterly denying reality in the face of the evidence that we have. And the craziest part when it comes to like Canada and the US, in the face of, you know, the Danish model and studies for affirmative care is where this started 20, 30 years ago. And they've pulled back. These are the most progressive countries in the world that have been pulling back because they've done systematic reviews of the evidence. But the American Academy of Pediatrics and all of these massive medical organizations and institutions, they've doubled down over here in the face of the evidence.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is one of the craziest things about everything that's happening in regard to like the issue of gender politics and ideology, and the fact that, you know, even when the studies were done in the past, it was done on a different cohort, a different patient population, because gender dysphoria actually in the past, typically it actually affected men more, and it started in youth. Like it started when they're little boys and it persisted to adulthood. And the studies that were done, that were used as evidence to push gender medicine on children today, were done on those populations that were primarily men who've had it since childhood, and were rigidly studied for other mental health issues to be able to be included in the studies in the first place. And now the patient population has exploded in young women, which these studies were a different patient population. So the conclusions actually can't even apply to this new patient population.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right? But it you know, these organizations that have been pushing it, they don't give a fuck
Of course they don't give a fuck
about the data, the reality, the evidence.
In the grand scheme of things, they don't care about us. They want to hold on to their riches. That's basically, I think.
Well, and it's also just people get looped up into ideologies, and one of the reasons that they do is similar to everything we saw around the pandemic and the vaccines and the lockdowns and the masks and the trucker protests.
I'm right and you're wrong.
It's I'm right and you're wrong, but it's that they have attached their beliefs to their identity, which is especially true around gender identity politics, right? But also that by holding XYZ set of beliefs and demonizing the other side that has ABC set of beliefs, you not only have these people attach their own beliefs to their own identity, but they've attached the other people's beliefs and identity, vice versa, to this other group, and then they latch on and they dig their heels in, and this is what humans do. This is how humans demonize and dehumanize other group of people, and then it's more acceptable to commit violence against them.
Yeah. And the thing with that, I think because like, you know, watching like some of these protests take place and everything, because I think the minute you lay your hand on someone in whatever context, like I don't care what you're fighting for, it's just your side goes to shit. Nothing should ever give you the right to put your hand on someone in that manner, especially with these people who go to protest and shit, and they're doing that to themselves, really. You know?
So one of the craziest things I've seen in the last year is one of the most outspoken women against gender ideology and biological men, you know, saying that they identify as women and identifying themselves into women's protected spaces. And it's not just washrooms, it's not just change rooms, it's men, biological men, people with male bodies who've gone through male puberty, who have massive advantages in size and muscle distribution compared to biological women,
which is not fair for them to
competing in women's sports. It's biological men.
Yeah, they need their own league with that shit, man, because they have the same, exactly what you said.
That's like nothing though.
No, but exactly what you said. They have the same muscle mass and the same body structure as they did when
they have a greater,
and they're dominating,
they have greater bone density.
And
they literally have stronger bones.
They're dominating women's sports, and it's not
right. But and then there's people that are like, this is literally not even happening. They just say all this stuff. You could literally point to all these examples of it clearly happening. Like people are saying, people aren't getting puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and mastectomies under 18. It's like Chloe Cole got a double mastectomy at 15 years old. There's a woman she's also suing now, this is something that's really going to be one of the only things to turn this ship around, is the lawsuits are beginning. Yeah. There's a woman named like Layla Jane who was given a double mastectomy at 13 years old. And there's people who are activists that are like, it's not even happening. There's not, men aren't dominating women's sports who are identifying into it. It's like, no, there's plenty of examples, and one's too much. Yeah. One is too much.
It comes back to being proven wrong. Nobody wants to be proven wrong, right? It's just like, and not only that,
but it's not even just being proven wrong. It's just outwardly denying reality and evidence that's clearly able to be pointed to.
Yeah, and and the thing is, if they're gonna eat each other alive at some point, if it's not already happening right now, which I think it is.
So. Worst thing in the realm of where men are identifying themselves into, though, is there are and there you can go and look this up and see dozens of examples. I believe you. But maybe I'll put it in the show notes. But there's dozens and dozens of examples of people who are convicted rapists and murderers, men, because male violence is disproportionately the case compared to women, which also is fucked because they're literally identifying and getting into women's prisons, and which is like clearly that's a loophole that a lot of people that aren't actually trans are going to use, so they don't have to go to a women's prison or a men's prison. Because you know what? Even inmates in a men's prison, they kill rapists, especially like child molesters and shit, man. And so they're identifying into women's prisons. They're getting their surgeries covered by taxpayers. Some of them don't even need to have done anything previously. No surgeries, no hormones, no nothing. No length of history of identifying this way. They're literally just on the intake to the prison forms. They are checking a box that says, actually, I identify as a woman. And they're getting put into women's prisons. And a bunch of these guys are convicted rapists and murderers. So that's happening.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, man.
But so get this though. One of the most outspoken women who she's from the UK, her name is Kelly J. Keane, I believe her name is. Yeah. She also goes by the name Parker Posey. Okay. And or Posey Parker Posey, I think. She has been holding these events across the world, across Europe, across America, going down to Australia and New Zealand, called Let Women Speak, where they're literally just going into a public forum and they're just saying like, hey, like, we don't agree with what's happening, and we obviously have to have the right to free speech to speak to it. And several months ago, she had an event in Auckland, New Zealand, where it was like the cops didn't come to be security for this event, which they're essentially like supposed to. They just kind of like didn't show up or showed up really late, where like the trans activists basically that got called to come and protest this event were so like such a violent mob, and the cops didn't come. She luckily had her own security, but there's video of like the security literally risked their life to get her out of this event, essentially before it even started, because the mob got so fucking rowdy and like broke past the barriers and shit. And like if they had have got their hands on her, they probably would have killed her.
Shit.
And it.
Yeah, I can see that.
There's literally video.
I can see that.
There's video of some young guy, whether he identifies as a woman or not, I don't know, but he punches some like 70-year-old woman like in the fucking head, and like apparently like cracked her skull or some shit. And it's like, so there's all this like crazy video of all this violence coming from the side that is preaching love and tolerance, who are so fucking intolerant of anyone who disagrees with anything they say. Yeah. That like yeah, like if you see that as one of the particularly sort of like egregious examples of this, is just wild, man. But on that note, as we come to the end of our conversation here, I'm going to pause and save so we don't lose this conversation. Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I want to, thank you for...
Yeah, for sure.
For being here, for coming, for having a conversation. Round 2, which I will fucking 100% get out to the public, and you can listen again.
The company was much better this time.
Yes, Gracie wasn't present last time. We were at VJ's hood last time, at VJ's crib. And, yeah, like... I guess one thing that I think is present for me right now, and that sometimes when I notice this with other people's podcasts, it can be annoying if the host is speaking more than the guest, basically. And so I just want to speak to that, because I obviously, these things, I've spent so much time learning about these things that there's so much for me to say about them. There's so much for me to express. It's not that like you haven't contributed or you haven't had the time to speak as well. But yeah, there's like, you get me on a tear on some of this shit and I'll just fucking go.
Well, look how much it's running rampant in society right now. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, it is dividing us on such a deep level that doesn't need to be. So, no, I learned a lot I definitely learned a lot in terms of like, I guess like lots of it where it stems from. You know what I mean?
Well, and that was part of like me sort of taking a bit more liberty to talk about some of the things I just spoke to, was especially like to lay out sort of the saga of like what's happening with Jordan Peterson in particular. Like there's a whole other saga with Andrew Tate, that like I have since listened to some really long interviews with him. So it's like that media narrative about him as well is just such utter bullshit.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that this person is unworthy of any criticism, or there's no validity to some of the stuff that's said about him, but
we both know that the mainstream media can't be trusted, especially with like talking about people like this and shit, because they show us what we want to see, or what they want us to see. What they want us to see. Sorry, and like especially like just like now I don't even trust the news to depict when what the weather's going to be like. You know what I mean? How many times
have you ever really trusted the weather?
Hell no. I go outside, however it's going to be, I deal with it. You know what I mean? It's just like I don't watch TV nearly as much as I used to because I don't trust them anymore.
That's so funny. Someone at my work just mentioned that the other day, and it's something my dad has always said my whole life, is that it's like, fuck, what a job to be the weatherman or woman. The only job you can be wrong every day about your job and you keep your job
and still think you're right.
But as we wrap up, is there anything that you would like to share? Is there anything that you would like to talk about as we come to the end of our conversation?
I think basically lots of what I repeated like earlier on in the podcast. It's like I think what it comes down to the most is just be willing to listen to the other side without getting engulfed in your triggers. And if you're gonna be, engaging in conversation like this, know that there's another side and there's a different way to understand each other. I think like when we really strive to understand one another and not really, just defend our positions, I feel like there's a lot more growth in communication that can be had. And again, we're all in this life together trying to figure out who we are and what we want to experience in it. And like the way to ease that along is to make good decisions and to not, engage in stuff that's gonna sap you of your energy. Like, fight and stand up for what you believe in, but find the balance, which, is essential in every area, every aspect of our lives, is to find balance in these things so we don't lose ourselves, we don't lose our center, and we don't get lost in, minuscule menial shit. You know what I mean? So I think that's all it comes down to. I'm glad that it's in my life I'm finally moving forward and experiencing life again as I was meant to, as an adventure. But at the same time, I'm in the fight and just making sure that like equality is here for everybody. I'm doing that in my own way, and it's a big part of like that work is never going to be done. Do you know what I mean? And it's just, I think it's
lifelong.
It is lifelong, and it's just it's a matter of how like choosing your battles, and
it's lifelong for all of us. Like we've got to live this life together. All of us, we have to live in society together. We have to live with people that we have different beliefs. We have different religions. We have different spiritual practices. We have different politics. We have to live together, like
pretty much,
And something that came to mind when you were just sharing is that it's like you just listened to me talk about something that you ultimately like didn't totally know a lot of the stuff I just talked about. And so I'm thinking sort of like you and me might have agreements on a lot of things that we might be talking about, on certain things that we believe, certain positions that we have, but it's not like we agree about everything. And in the context of listening to someone speak about something that you don't even actually have knowledge about or context about, it's like you don't even know if you agree or not until you have the conversation, until you listen to the other person. And now it's like you can go and you can learn more about it yourself, or you can just digest the conversation that was just had to even come to knowing what you think about it, or knowing if it confirms or challenges your beliefs. And it's like we've got to have the conversations. Like for instance, one of the people that I was sharing that 20 plus years of friendship, and she doesn't like a lot of the things I've been posting. And one of the last conversations that we had, I sort of have, extended that olive branch to be like, let's have a call, let's have a real talk, because I know for a fact that what you think you're getting from me, which is partially my fault, I can own up to, because this person is one of the most left-leaning people that I know. So when I'm posting shit that's railing against left-wing politics and ideology, it's actually actively with her in mind, because she's one of the most far left people I know. So it's not surprising that she experiences the things that I'm writing as being diametrically opposed to things that she believes, because actually I have her in mind while I'm thinking about it. But that's because I know her to have a set of beliefs that is different to mine in these topics more than anyone else. But I'm actually having a conversation later tonight with her boyfriend, who's a friend of mine, who he reached out to me actually because of something else that I posted that he actually wants to have a conversation with me about. Because he disagrees with me about it. Yeah. And I'm like, awesome. I'm so happy to have those conversations.
Let's have a talk. Yeah,
let's not you see me post something that you disagree with or you actually have questions about, and then decide that I think this and I am this because I posted this, which we could have an hour conversation about actually, to think what do I actually think about this, or what was my posting that actually meant to convey, or was it just a shit post? Was it just like funny, and actually not even something I believe? And it's like, we're gonna have a talk. Yeah. And he chose, it's like he chose to reach out to me with the prospect of having a conversation rather than cutting me off out of his life because now I'm this.
Yeah, which is good. And that's what adults do, right?
Basically, right?
Which is good.
And one last loop that is still open in my head is, you said that, this life is an adventure and it's meant to be an adventure. And that actually is one of Jordan Peterson's most repeated messages that he talks about, is that, like, one of the things that's the most deeply damaging thing to us as an individual and as accumulatively as a society is the lack of meaning and purpose that people have in their lives is deeply tied to the lack of having like an adventure, having like knowing what your why is and going on an adventure. And he says that, like, this is a Buddhist concept. Like, nothing he says are like shit that he just made up himself. It's like studying world religion, studying philosophy, studying psychology, and like the idea that life is suffering, or that suffering is intimately tied to being a living being, because we know we're all going to die, so is our family, and all sorts of catastrophe is going to happen, is that you develop meaning by knowing, like, what is your why, what's the adventure of your life, and how can you shoulder the suffering that comes with being a living creature and speak the truth in the face of all the reasons to not, all the fears to not, all the social pressures to not, and take whatever's going to come with that, take on the responsibility of finding, like, shouldering your suffering, speaking what you actually believe to be true in the face of your fears, all the fears to not. Yeah. And that's how you find the adventure of your life. And you do that by taking on responsibility, not quabbling about your fucking rights. And that recognizing that all of your rights come with responsibility. And it's by taking on responsibility. This is one of the reasons that his message is, like, landing so well with young men, is that your lack of meaning and purpose and your suffering is intimately attached to your lack of taking responsibility for yourself and your life, and your adventure of your life is dependent upon speaking the truth to power and to social pressures and to whatever it might be, and that's where the meaning and the purpose is going to come from.
Yeah.
That's where the adventure is going to come from. And so many of the people that are demonizing him and left-wing, he fucking rails against the left-wing radicals, are people that are infantilely crying about their rights and privileges.
I don't think it's rights. I think it's more crying about their feelings more than rights.
But it's their feelings about their perceived wrongs against their rights. Their right to be addressed as they say, they say,
which is still their feelings.
No matter how, no matter how ridiculous it gets, and even the idea that like, oh well, I'll be a man today and I'll be a woman tomorrow, and you better fucking address me as I say so, otherwise I will use the heavy hand of the law.
The truth is more important than feelings.
And it's like, those are the messages, and it's not from just him. It's like, these are messages that humans have been trying to understand and to fight over and to figure out, and for all of human history, all of humanity, the whole history of humanity. And it's not going away anytime soon. It's not getting any less complicated. It's got only infinitely more complicated as society has gotten. There's more of us. Social media, AI's coming. We're in this fucking adventure together, and we have to be in it together. We can't fight against one another.
Yeah.
On this journey.
Pretty much. I guess that's where we're trying to end as time goes on, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, actually, one thing that I'm curious about, is there anything, like, what comes to mind about, like, what has you most excited and optimistic about, like, something you've learned, or like your life, or something you're thinking about, something you're like, what has you excited and optimistic about your life and about the future?
I think it's over, like, my journey within the past. I'm gonna dive into the past 3 years of how I've lived my life in terms of just trusting my intuition, and knowing, just following that like, it's like kind of like that invisible field of guidance that's telling me that you're meant, not so much I'm meant to do certain things, but follow the beat of your own drum. And I've seen it everywhere. Usually, wherever I go, that my presence is usually well received. And when I'm meeting new strangers, or when I'm reconnecting with old friends, I think it's just leaving a piece of me in the places where I go. I was at a buddy's birthday party yesterday, and I haven't seen these. I never went to his school. We all kind of like went to different schools, but there was a bunch of people there who knew me, who I haven't seen in a long time, and just like the magnetism I can feel of me, between me and them to me, I haven't felt that in years. So it's just it's more of like knowing that that's what I give to the world, and putting that into this life as much as I can. And in different ways and in different situations, and like that, lots of that is through my own just enjoying my journey, and just enjoying my own company, and sharing that with others. Like, I used to I want to say it, like, I guess codependent is the word, like in my earlier years in high school and in my early to mid 20s, and then once I started really just relying on myself and trusting and enjoying my own company, it opened up this wide spectrum of adventure, as we were just talking about just now. So it's, for me, it's just it's finding more adventure in my life, and like there are little things that happen in my day-to-day that make me happy, and it's just, I think once the moment I stop paying attention to that my life is always has been surrounded with these little moments that bring me joy and peace and clarity. It's just it's those moments that make me feel alive and make this life worth living and experiencing. And then I can magnify that, and I can intensify that in any way I want to. I'm just ironing out my creases as I go along, you know what I mean, in how I live my life, and that's it. I think it's just enjoying my existence, the fact that I'm alive and able to breathe and still experience my human form. It's you know what I mean, because sometimes I guess sometimes I get lost in these void moments of like, what if it all ended right now, and like not so much where I want to like, off myself or anything, but it's just like, what if this life ended? Like, would I be content and happy with everything that I've done? I'm like, yes, I would, but at the same time, I know there's still a lot more chapters in the story of my life that I've yet to feel and to experience. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So,
I know, no, totally. Like I've heard people say that before, where it's like if I were to die today, would I feel complete? Would I feel happy and content with like where I'm at and what I've done and who I've been? And then people are like, often when they bring that up, they're like, I think I would be, or they're like, very directly like, I would be,
Yeah.
And I'm listening. Whenever I hear that, I'm like, no. I'm always like, no, not me, man. There's so many things I want to do and so many things I feel I haven't like accomplished. Like in some ways I can like relate to that, and then in other ways I'm like, nah, man, like
you got a lot more living to do, man.
I hope I got a lot more time left. Well, part of it too is like I'm in debt from school and from certain programs I've taken and stuff, and I'm like, if I were to like get in a car accident, get hit by a car and die, like would that debt get put onto like my family or something, because I don't have like life insurance? So that's something that sort of like,
I hope not.
I
That'd be
think
really
there.
fucking sneaky
I
if that
think.
was
I
the
think
case.
there. I. It could go one way or another, but I think there is an ability for that to sort of happen. Like it's like,
Interesting.
if you don't have things set up, like there, on one of my credit cards, for instance, you have like a payment protection thing where if you like lose your job, it'll sort of like cover you if you have something happen, or if you died by accident. It'll sort of just like get rid of it because you have that set up. Same as how like if you have life insurance set up, you'll kind of have your shit covered. But I have something like that on one of my credit cards, but I don't have just like a general life insurance. Although I might through my work benefits. Shit gets kind of complicated. But I've had this feeling where like one of the reasons I say no to that question, like would I be content and happy if I died right now? I'm like, I don't know. Not if like the banks go after my mom and dad for the debt I still owe. I gotta get that shit fucking taken care of. But I do want to say, we know each other because we did a couple leadership programs together a few years ago, and we've stayed in touch. And you've expressed that, I'm one of the few people that you've remained in touch with, and I've expressed the same. You're one of the few people that I've remained in touch with, and I think what you're saying about, friendship and just kind of existing and connecting with people and bringing yourself and your energy and your kind of like your light into other people's lives and just existence is, like I want to say that rings true for me. That's why, that's why we've stayed friends. That's why we've stayed in contact, where I haven't stayed in contact with many people. I'm a little like, I feel like I don't have a lot of friends, like, and part of the reason for that is because, I'm extremely interested in ideas and learning about all sorts of things in my free time, that it's like, I spent a lot of my youth hanging out with friends and drinking beers and smoking weed and partying, and that's all fine, and there's a place for that. But I'm also like deeply interested in and concerned with the big questions about life and humanity and what's going on in the world, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming today
I appreciate you having me
to talk to me again, and your friendship, and that we've stayed in touch. And I think it's hard to overstate how much loneliness and a lack of friendships that people have population wide, we know this with different studies, is affecting a lot of this stuff that we're talking about as well. And so like I just want to say, my friends are few, and I'm honored to count you as one, and appreciate you. And Yeah, thanks for.
Thank you for having me, man. And likewise, it's just it's especially it's important to have friends who you can bounce the ideas and the mindset and just people. I think the biggest part of why I love the friends I have so much is they're always encouraging me to grow in terms of either these kinds of topics or sharing those perspectives that are gonna help us look at life in a different way and carry ourselves differently. I think it's important for friends to want to care to do that for one another. I think the moment that nobody cares, it's like the moment you lose friends like that, it's unfortunate, but at the same time, when I have friends, for me, unless they do something really fucking stupid, they're in my life for life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if I think at some point, if and it's not people outgrow people all the time, and it's an unfortunate thing to do, and obviously it's no hard feelings, but at the end of the day,
friends and family.
Yeah, you're doing
it happens.
Yeah, you're doing what's best for you, and the friends I have in my life from here on out are always adding to my table, and I'm always looking to add to their table too. You know what I mean? So I'm glad we got to do that for each other, and we're doing that for each other right now. So I appreciate you too. Thank you, man.
Cool, man. Well, bring it in.
Yeah, bring it in.
Bring it in.
Hey, shush. We're good. You're good. Thank you for protecting me, baby.
All right, let's go get some pizza, man.
Fuck yeah.
What do you mean you're leaving?
My owner just died.
What is this fucking tease, man?
It was, dude. It's heartbreaking. Every damn time, it's heartbreaking. I decline to answer pursuant to my Fifth Amendment right.
Really?
I plead the Fifth.
Really?
This?
No. Yeah, but don't click it.
Oh, don't click it. My bad.
While we're talking.
Gotcha.
That will be on the recording. Hey, cut it out.
Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? You know what I mean? I think for a vast majority of my life, I've always strived to be happy. You
I want to be
mean?
right.
What's that?
I want to be right.
No. Honestly, when I'm, I want to say old and gray, it's kind of starting already. But I'm gonna play baseball with my phone. I'm gonna have someone.
I don't see
preferably
a
my
single
partner.
fucking gray hair. Your hair looks
I plucked them all
jet
out.
black. Oh, okay.
That's why.
I'm like, what do you mean it's starting?
I'm gonna have my partner pitch me my phone.
Because I know I get stuck in my ego. Mm-hmm. I know I want to be right. I know I like to be right. Mm-hmm. I know I'm fighting for my beliefs because I want to win. Yeah. Because there's a part of me that wants to do that, and that I'm trying to fight against a ghost of the caricature and the story that I've made up about this person is it's like a ghost. It's not real.
It's not a real thing,
right?
Yeah.
And it's only by having those conversations and the humility to actually
to just admit you were wrong, man. It literally can be as simple as that. Because I remember my transition into through conversations with
Are
other
you
people.
a they them now?
Well, I'm a raging lesbian. I will tell you that.
Okay.
I will tell you that.
I
much.
believe you.
She's cute.
My dog. He's not talking about a human. He just said she, they just said they're a raging lesbian.
Oh my god, that's funny. Makes good decisions going forward, which is what we all should be doing. You know what I mean? Sorry, the driver's seat, not the steering wheel. Sorry, you're in the driver's seat of your life.
One with the steering wheel.
The steering wheel.
You are the steering wheel.
I mean,
that tracks. That makes sense.
I told
you are the steering wheel.
And I was telling this to my dad once. I'm just Dad,
but
no.
That's the thing, right? And dude, can you fucking believe that shit, Gracie? Yeah. We do have common ground. We do have common goals. And one is to not destroy our fucking society and civilization.
Exactly.
Say fuck yeah once more.
Fuck yeah.
I stopped recording on this. I got the first fuck yeah, but then I stopped recording, and the second fuck yeah, I was like, oh, that was a better fuck yeah. it was louder.
That's awesome.
Fuck yeah.
I know. I stand up abruptly sometimes. It's nothing. Okay.
I can't even reach the seat pocket, you know? Swatting for my copy of 12 Rules for Life by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. only I could reach it, then I could become a man. I want to be like the lobster. I love this job. So good.